all the people that have gone out there against the mainstream media and said, you're going to call us racist? You're going to call us potential Timothy McVeighs? Fuck you. War.
Quite sure he's right. Obsessionally neurotic. Pretty dangerous, in fact.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
Do you mean you doubt your powers to convince him?
Say it! Say it!
All right, I'll say it.
Worse than that. What I'm afraid of is his power to convince me.
We're talking about putting a manifestly irresponsible man on national television.
Sweetheart, be reasonable.
War.
This is the end game.
There we are. Still seem off kilter. I don't know what's happened to my camera. I'm off kilter now. Guess I'm just off kilter. Well, anyhow, we're just going to have to make it work. It is Tuesday, May 27th, 2025, the 128th day of the Golden Age. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. I hope you all had a nice Memorial Day weekend and took some time to think about what Memorial Day weekend means and took some time to be with some friends and family or whatever it is that you enjoy. It was a weekend filled with not a big news weekend, but some interesting things worth talking about. And then just ongoing developments in the stories that we've been tracking over these many months. And so we'll get into all of that. We're going to talk Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson. We're going to talk AI and an amazing AI video that came out yesterday. I wrote a piece about it on Substack. You can find that at imyourmoderator.substack.com. We're going to talk about a little American politics, a little about the courts, and then about some geopolitics, particularly Russia, because we're all going to die now. I guess it's time for the kinetic part of World War III to start. Of course, the kinetic part of World War III is, I guess you could say, been happening for a long time. Certainly other parts beyond kinetic have been happening for a long time. So do I think we're entering a new stage with Russia? No, I do not. No, I do not. But makes for a good story. And that is what we're dealing with here. So let's start with the image of the weekend, as far as I'm concerned. This is from Donald Trump on Truth Social on Saturday. Sunday, sorry. The 25th. He says, I always said golf can be a dangerous sport. Whoa, my friend being bit at Bedminster. And he shows, I guess, his friend, the golfer, being bit by what seems to be a white swan. Maybe it's a white goose, but I'm pretty sure that's a swan. And just to be sure that I was sure, I put it through ChatGPT and said, hey, is this a goose or a swan? And it said swan. So I have to go with the machine on this one and my own initial instinct. I think it's a white swan. And if it's a white swan, then it could be an interesting public communication. And I don't know. I'm not suggesting that I know what we should make of this right now or that we should assume that we're going to know. sometimes these communications just remain totally obscured and are not for us, or maybe it's a little hint. So the term Black Swan became famous and maybe was coined by the writer Nassim Nicholas Taleb in a book that he wrote called The Black Swan. He's also famous, and the book that I read, portion, I think like half of, why can't I think of the name right now? Anti-Fragility, about his description of things as anti-fragile. What that means is rather than breaking and coming totally undone when increased tension is applied to an object or an organization or a person or whatever, rather than falling apart, they actually become stronger from the tension being applied. So that's, I always found that to be a really interesting and useful theory and framing. And I think the Black Swan is useful as well. Now, Taleb went completely bonkers during COVID. I don't know if he's recovered. He is a strong trust the science guy. He is a major elitist and thinks that he's got it all figured out. That's when I left him. Again, I haven't paid attention to the guy in 5 years. If you know better, by all means, tell me. But the term Black Swan describes highly improbable events that are unpredictable, have massive impact, and are often rationalized in hindsight as if they were predictable. Okay. And so he gives examples of this in the book, The Black Swan, The Impact of the Highly Improbable. And some of the examples he gives are the 9/11 attacks, the rise of the internet, the personal computer revolution, World War I, the 2008 global financial crisis, long-term capital management collapse in 1998 with the hedge funds. And in terms of business, Google's rise, the success of Harry Potter, the fall of the Soviet Union, a political black swan, apparently, and pandemics like COVID-19, although I doubt that, and I'm certain that was not included in Taleb's book. Nonetheless, a lot of those events, when seen through the lens of, I don't know, I guess you could call it the conspiratorial worldview, that things are actually happening for a reason rather than just a series of random events around the world, even though we can go back and understand that people actually planned and orchestrated those events. So the 9/11, come on. 2008 financial disaster, ridiculous. These are ridiculous examples of black swans. But then again, we're dealing with Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who has, as I said, lost his mind. Maybe it was never there. He doesn't think that these events are predictable. They are literally orchestrated. Now, they might come as black swans to the public, and he may make that distinction in places, to be fair to him. And if that's the case, then fine. But the people orchestrating the events certainly know that they're coming. And as we have seen over the years, they message that the events are coming. Because when the events come, they want people to interpret the events in the framing they've been given and then react in the ways they've been conditioned to react. Hence, the entire purpose of the propaganda, of the rewriting of history, of the fake news of the present, and the stories about how the future is going to turn out. That's the reason they do that, so that we form the beliefs as they prescribe and then take the actions that they prescribe. So a white swan event is an event that is, an event that is expected or predictable, has known probabilities or patterns, can be modeled with conventional statistics, and typically has limited or contained impact. Okay. So it's not going to go across the entire society. It's not outside the bounds of what we're generally accustomed to. And it's the sort of thing that we expect could happen. And so the examples given of this are like airplane crashes, car accidents, annual flu outbreaks, stock market fluctuations, or death from heart disease in an aging population. It's funny how many of those can be looked at with completely new eyes after the COVID so-called pandemic. So are we approaching a white swan event, something that could be expected, something that will go in line with the statistical patterns, something whose impact is largely contained? And what could that be? I don't know if he was talking about something that's already happened, if he's talking about something that will soon happen. It's impossible to know. It's a strange signal. One thing we can kind of be sure of is that he wasn't just posting a fun picture of his friend getting bit by a white swan at Bedminster. I mean, is the friend going to sue him and be like, hey, your swan damaged my hand? Or maybe it was his crotch. I can't tell what the swan was biting. They were all kind of in the same general area. That's proof right there. I mean, President Trump put the proof out. The friend is going to sue him. It's going to be successful just because of that picture. I can't imagine that that was the reason. So who knows? But a little fun to start things off. Now, the more important aspects of the weekend were Donald Trump speaking at West Point and then the commemoration of Memorial Day yesterday. So I want to play some clips from those two events and we can discuss those, but mostly just for some flavor, you know? Got to have some flavor. Here we are.
Our arsenals to fight other countries' wars. We fought for other countries' borders, but we didn't fight for our own border, but now we do, like we have never fought before, by the way. But under the Trump administration, those days are over. We're getting rid of the distractions and we're focusing our military on its core mission, crushing America's adversaries, killing America's enemies, and defending our great American flag like it has never been defended before.
So a repurposing of the military. We're no longer going to go around the world defending the borders of other countries. We're going to stay here and defend our own borders. That's what we're supposed to have, is national defense, not a war-fighting apparatus that goes around conquering other lands or just forcing those lands to conform to a globalist enterprise, a globalist system that is actually not representative of American values or Americanism or the goals and desires of the American people. Most importantly, perhaps. Let's continue. Hold for processing.
Success. We had the most incredible economy, the single greatest economy for a president in history. I think we're going to beat it this time by a lot, if you want to know the truth. But we had something going on very special. But if the United States or its allies are ever threatened or attacked, the Army will obliterate our opponents with overwhelming strength and devastating force. That's why my administration has begun a colossal buildup of the United States Armed Forces, a buildup like we've never had before. Peace through strength. You know the term. I've used it a lot. Because as much as you want to fight, I'd rather do it without having to fight. I just want to look at them and have them fold. And that's happening. That's happening.
So the military buildup caught my ear because, you know, we hear stories all the time. Right now, there's stories about how Russia is amassing this massive army near their western borders. They're going to invade all of Europe. We're hearing that China is building up their military presence in the South China Sea around Taiwan. They're going to invade Taiwan. I get it. You know, I get all these things are going to happen. Xi's going to invade Taiwan, just like Putin launched his very brutal invasion into Ukraine. Eventually, North Korea is going to invade South Korea. We're already hearing that. Venezuela is going to invade Guyana. We're going to hear about that next year or the year after. all of these stories continue. But what we're hearing about are military buildups in the region while we are doing our own military buildup. If we are moving to a multipolar system, and I think that it's already kind of locked in that we are, and we are America first, then other countries can be Russia first, China can be China first, etc. So should we be intimidated that other countries are building up their military? Does that mean we're about to go to war? I would suggest to you that President Trump just said the purpose of a military buildup is not going to war, saying, hey, here's what we have. This is what we'll do. Let's figure out another way to solve it. And, you know, he's maybe a bit brash, but also probably has the cards in saying that he just wants to be able to look at an opponent and have them fold. And I would suggest that that is very much in line with Sun Tzu's Art of War. And the peace through strength element in terms of military buildup is a good thing to keep in the back of our minds when we're hearing about these military buildups in other lands as some kind of justification for us to push for war. Oh no, they're building up their military. Therefore, we have to strike them first before they get strong. That's the neocon program and playbook that's been run on us so many times. I'm in my mid-40s. I've seen it run more times than I can remember. So I can imagine for any of you that might be older, you've seen it run. I imagine they've been running this since well before World War II. They've probably been running it longer than any person on the planet has been alive. So yeah, I think that the framing there is what's worth keeping in mind. And then I always have to bring it back to the mandate.
You know, we had the greatest election victory. This was November 5th. We won the popular vote by millions of votes. We won all 7 swing states. We won everything. We won 2,750 districts against 505. 2,750 against 505. We had a great mandate, and it gives us the right to do what we want to do to make our country great again, and that's what we're going to do. And
the mandate gives us the right to make the country great again, and that's what we're going to do. That's fully in line with what we've been talking about throughout this Trump term, probably since I would say November. He's got the people's mandate. It is indisputable. Nobody questions the fact that Donald Trump was announced the winner of the fake election in 2024. And that is proof of the public mandate. The same thing did not happen for Joe Biden. There was ample, if not majority, clamoring for Trump's win to be recognized, for the election to be reviewed, for Joe Biden's declared victory to be annulled, for the fake certification and the fake inauguration to be reversed. And people kept that call going for 4 years, including and especially myself and all of you. So the people's mandate is what matters. It is what has always mattered. Trump is saying the people's mandate gives us a right to make the country great again. And that's what we're going to do. The people's mandate supersedes court precedent and rules and regulations. We'll get into some of that later on. It supersedes the Constitution even. It goes right back to the Declaration of Independence and Thomas Jefferson making it quite clear that the people have the right and the duty to throw off any form of government that has become too corrupted and no longer looks after their interests. And so the people's mandate is on the side of Donald Trump. If people want a government to continue, then they should continue that government in the way Donald Trump wants it continued. And this isn't about Trump. This is about what's behind Trump. And what's behind Trump is the American people. Let us continue. This is from his Memorial Day speech. And the clip's almost 3 minutes long, but I think it's worth it because the beginning's great. And then toward the end, he talks about the birthday.
And that's what they are, as great, great warriors, picked up their mantle of duty and service, knowing that to live for others meant always that they might die for others. They knew that. They asked nothing for it. They gave everything, and we owe them everything and much, much more. Each of the service members who have made the supreme sacrifice for our nation has also left an unfillable void and an unbreakable silence in the lives of all who love them. For the families of the fallen, you feel the absence of your heroes every day in the family. These are great families. These are wonderful families. In the familiar laugh no longer heard, the empty space at Sunday dinner, or the want of a hug or a pat on the back that will never come again. Every Gold Star family fights a battle long after the victory is won, and today we lift you up and we hold you high. Thank you, thank you, thank you for giving America the brightest light in your lives. It's what you've done. We will never, ever forget our fallen heroes, and we will never forget our debt to you. This Memorial Day is especially significant as we commemorate 250 years since the first American patriots fell on the field of battle. 2.5 centuries ago at Lexington Green, Concord Bridge, Bunker Hill, brave Minutemen and humble farm boys became the first to give their lives for a nation that did not yet have a name. With their deaths, men like John Brown, 23, Samuel Hadley, 28, and Abner Hosner, 21, ignited the flame of liberty that now lights the inspires everybody and the entire world. Those young men could never have known what their sacrifice would mean to us, but we certainly know what we owe to them. Their valor gave us the freest, greatest, and most noble republic ever to exist on the face of the earth, a republic that I am fixing after a long and hard 4 years. That was a hard 4 years we went through.
That was a hard 4 years we went through. The 250th birthday party, Trump announced it last week. It's really happening. We are 2.5 weeks away from that. Going to be interesting. It keeps coming up. It's important. And it's important not only for its significance in American history, but also for the storytelling that's happening in real time. We've seen in so many of the events that have unfolded over the last decade, this echo of the past. You know, I was having a conversation with ChatGPT today about the paragliding go-kart incident, and it harkened back to the Yom Kippur War and said there's a lot of similar aspects in this and how they were viewed by the public. And of course, they called the paragliding go-kart event Israel's 9/11. But, you know, we see in the Russia-Ukraine event narrative a callback to World War II and a correction of a lot of what was miscommunicated to us, the things we've been indoctrinated with. The same thing has happened down in Israel, between Israel and Gaza. People have looked at the formation of Israel, the political power that Israel has in the United States of America, and they've reconsidered these things because they're able to look at these past events through the retellings of these stories in a different form and format. And it gives people the opportunity to reconsider the things that they believed to be true in terms of these historical adversarial relationships and, you know, these enemy countries that we are now making positive advances toward to form business deals, trade relationships, and alliances, if not outright peace agreements. Let's continue. There's one more clip I wanted to share from the Memorial Day speech. And as a preface, I remember in 2020 when people were arguing with me constantly because they thought I had gone crazy. I remember being told by someone that in a group email that Donald Trump his speeches were terrible. He was a stupid man, always self-centered, narcissistic, egotistic, whatever the rest of it is. And in that email, he sent along like 10 quotes that he had compiled, that he, like, by these great thinkers that made it clear that Donald Trump was the bad guy. And he said, Trump never says anything like any of these quotes. Okay. I mean, if you say so. But let's also then go ahead and check this out.
Patriotism and devotion and acts of selflessness and courage so enormous they defy comprehension. Most people can't even imagine it. Great poets have written that it's love which moves the sun and the stars, but here on the sacred soil, right where we are, we're reminded that it's love which moves the course of history and moves it always toward freedom, always. From Bunker Hill to Bastogne to Cantigny to Coral Sea, from Gettysburg to Guadalcanal and Concord to Kabul, America's best and America's bravest have fought, bled, and died so that we could pick up the torch of liberty, raise it high, 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 and carry it onward to places they could never have dreamed of before. Today we honor their memory. We remember their gallantry. We just revere, in the highest sense, we just revere their incredible legacy. We salute them in their eternal and everlasting glory, and we continue our relentless pursuit of America's destiny as we make our nation stronger, prouder, freer, and greater than ever before. May God bless our fallen heroes. May God bless our Gold Star families, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much, everybody. Great honor. Thank you.
Now, I'm not going to tell you that it sent chills down my leg like Chris Matthews talking about Barack Obama. Donald Trump did not just promise to make the seas rise or fall. I'm not sure which way they were trying to go with that. A rising tide lifts all ships, that stuff. But also the polar ice caps are melting and we can't have that happen because it's going to make the water rise. So Trump didn't have anything quite like that, but that was very poetic, very literary. And the problem is, I've always thought this since 2020. I actually wrote something about this with Trump and Mike Lindell, I think in 2021. People of a certain, I don't know, self-image, self-regard, generally people who have college educations or are the children of college-educated parents, they come to believe that certain voices are not worth listening to, that whatever comes out of those voices just doesn't sound right. And so Mike Lindell's voice is very harsh. I mean, I think he's got a hearing problem, so he's over talking a lot, and his voice is very gruff, and he's very in your face the entire time, and that puts a lot of people off. And then they don't listen to what Mike Lindell's saying. And Donald Trump has kind of a different thing with his cadence and his voice and the way that he kind of tries to cover over when the teleprompter's not quite working. And they think that the speech makes no sense. But if you were to read those words on the page, that was excellent. And worthy of all those ridiculous quotes, I was sent by that person back in 2020. And I think that he did a wonderful job honoring our nation's fallen. Now, those were the kind of uplifting and patriotic aspects of the weekend. But then there's also this. You might remember that May 25th is George Floyd's day, and the WNBA hosted a moment of silence for George Floyd.
Thank you guys for taking a minute to honor the life of George Floyd. George was a father, a brother, and a son. And his life, like every life, held meaning. His death exposed the holes that are still in our justice and criminal institutions today. And his 5-year anniversary reminds us that we must continue the fight against criminal, racial, and social injustices.
Wow. St. Floyd's Day or George Floyd Day. I haven't decided which one I like better. St. George Floyd's Day sounds too long. But anyhow, it's been 5 years since George Floyd, to the extent that he's a person, died of a fentanyl overdose while being restrained by a policeman's knee, to the extent that video was real. And I think all that's questionable. And oh yeah, he's also, he was murdered by Derek Chauvin. Wouldn't want to spread misinformation. You can decide which one of those stories is misinformation. We've been told, I don't know if it's going to happen, but we've been told that there's a chance that Donald Trump is going to pardon Derek Chauvin. And at that point, then everybody's got permission to set the country on fire. So something to look forward to, at least. Now, the WNBA keeps coming up in my feeds, which couldn't be more annoying. And one of the reasons is because the people who have made themselves obsessed with race over the last few years, thinking that race is the most important factor in what's happening in the world right now. And I'm not saying it's not a factor, and I'm not saying it's not important, and I'm not saying people don't have the right to want their nation to be as it was. Okay. Get all of that out of the way. Nonetheless, there's still an info op going on that focuses people on race all the time. And there's like a rivalry between Caitlin Clark, I guess is her name, that like college superstar who joined the WNBA last year, and then her arch nemesis, I think her name's Angel Reese or something. They're trying to recreate Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird. They ran this story 40 years ago, and they're running it again now in the WNBA. And because there's this racial tension involved, now people watch it. Oh, I'm on Team Caitlin. Oh, I'm on Team Angel. Who cares? There's 600 people in the building. Why are you watching it at home? It's not even worth seeing live. Gosh, man, I don't know where our culture is going, that people need something to watch on television to give them something to root for and to cheer for, pass their time while feeling that they're helping by doing absolutely nothing. Cheering for Caitlin Clark is totally irrelevant, except to the people trying to sell the WNBA as a viable entertainment product to attract advertisers to pay them money while you at home sit and watch the WNBA as it changes your reality. And we will get to that later as well. Also celebrating George Floyd's Day is none other than Alex Soros. This is from X, formerly Twitter. 5 years since George Floyd was murdered. 5 years since millions of all races and backgrounds demanded that Black Lives Matter, not just in word, but in action. And by the way, that WNBA lady, she basically said all lives matter. That was messed up. So many of the corporations, this is Soros again, and institutions that were so vocal for change have retreated or would rather forget where they once stood in 2020. All this while police killings have only gone up since, with 2024 being the deadliest year on record. And despite Joe Biden being quote unquote president, Black Lives Matter and Antifa still didn't go out and burn the country down? What's with that? Do they not care about this police violence anymore? Thank goodness we have Alex Soros to remind them that they should be more upset than they were in 2020, if anything. Gotta love the mention of the corporations and the institutions, by the way. I guess they have concluded that the DEI race and gender-based initiatives are not in their best interest, and that it doesn't actually help them sell more products. And of course, I don't think that they really cared back then, because they're all participating in the same funding pools that the rest of the global regime is funding, first of all, and then other parts of it participating. So they were pushing all that messaging to make the propaganda work. It's not because they thought it was a good move for their corporation. It's just that the incentives were provided to make it worthwhile. And so they went along with it. And now the incentives have changed. Continuing with Soros. 5 years after, I hope this day can serve as a reminder that lasting change does not come quickly. I hope today can serve as a reminder to remember where you were and where you stood 5 years ago, and to recommit to a society where violence is not rewarded and Black lives indeed do matter. Now, I'm a person who doesn't believe that lives can be black. Skin can be black, I guess, but it's really just dark brown. But yeah, lives cannot be black. And it's a very weird thing that they have branded that term into our pervasive knowledge at this point. Everybody has basically accepted the frame of Black lives and the notion that they might not matter. It's all very strange, but hey, 5 years on, and we haven't yet seen anyone begin to burn down the country, which is good. And we can hope that because of the summer of love and everything after, Antifa and Black Lives Matter were largely rounded up, probably geo-tracked, and discovered. Whistleblowers would have been outing people. So much has happened between now and then. Donald Trump talked about Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. Where have they gone? We heard there were going to be riots post Dobbs' decision a couple years back. Nothing materialized. So you have to wonder what their capacity, what their capabilities are at this point. Hopefully they've been totally nullified. I suggested last week that the killing outside the Jewish Heritage Museum or whatever, and the response to that suggested that they may have been trying to drum up another George Floyd, Jewish George Floyd, to justify not only the chaos that they would then cause on both sides, right? There would be two sides of the chaos. For every Black Lives Matter Antifa, we have a Proud Boys, right? We have a, what are the guys with the masks who have been marching around for the last 4 years? I can't think of them. I think they have freedom in their name or something. It's so stupid. Anyhow, somebody in the chat will probably name it, but whatever. So it's been 5 years since George Floyd, and I think that we would be better served putting that chapter to bed forever. And I do wonder if it's going to be something about that case. I mean, to the extent that the actual Derek Chauvin was involved in that video, to the extent that was a real video, to the extent that the actual Derek Chauvin was in the courtroom to be tried for murder, and I'm not convinced that he was, and that case was a real case, and I'm not convinced that it is, and those jurors were actually real jurors, and I'm not convinced that they were. But to the extent that all that was real, then Derek Chauvin definitely deserves not to be behind bars for the murder of George Floyd, which apparently he did by holding him in a hold method that was described by the Minneapolis police manual, and also the autopsy showed that George Floyd died from a fentanyl overdose. He was also saying, "I can't breathe," before he got on the ground. And he was crying out for mama, and that was his girlfriend. And George Floyd and Derek Chauvin knew each other because they used to work at that nightclub. But also, there was all of this counterfeit money flowing into Minneapolis. And George Floyd had a counterfeit bill at the convenience store right before that tragic event that may or may not have happened. And of course, that nightclub then burns down. Why? And then they burns down, if I'm not mistaken, the Minneapolis police precinct. Fiery, but mostly peaceful protests. So I would suggest that believing the official story about any of that is very dumb. The chat is reminding me that it's the Patriot Front. Yes, indeed. That is exactly what I was trying to think of. Those guys who look like FBI agents in khakis, wearing masks and baseball caps and carrying around their own special logo shields. Those absolute losers. That's who I'm referring to. Are they the same as BLM Antifa? No, these guys are actors. And it's, you don't have to insult them by suggesting that they actually believe the things that they are purported to believe. Not that they really have beliefs. What a silly group. We're in such silly times. I guess that's what makes it entertaining, though. All right. So a couple of years ago, 3 years ago almost, August of 2022, I did a couple of episodes on a man named Sam Harris. Sam Harris is, when introduced on podcasts and in appearances, referred to as a neuroscientist because he studied neuroscience at Stanford, but did not finish his degree. He's not a doctor. He's not a PhD. He's just a guy that studied neuroscience in college and is a child of privilege. Okay. Sam Harris went on to write the book, The End of Faith, and he also wrote The Moral Landscape, among other books. I've read everything Sam Harris has ever written. He used to be an intellectual hero of mine when I was an atheist. I thought that he was making very sound, science-based, reality-based arguments about all of his views. He said that he blamed faith for being the critical error, believing things without evidence, the critical error that led to events like 9/11 and other terrorist incidents around the world. And his argument was always that no matter what you wanted to say about the causes of these events, there's no doubt that because of religious concerns and faith-based beliefs, the people, the suicide bombers, definitely believed in what they were doing and would be rewarded for it in the afterlife. That was the argument he made, and primarily in The End of Faith, but in virtually every conversation he had since, or for probably 10 years or so, because he was consistently asked to be one of the quote unquote new atheists and discuss religion and lay out the case for why belief in God is not only a bad thing and a stupid thing, but a dangerous thing. Okay. So in The Moral Landscape, again, he's arguing for a worldly, reality-based, objective morality. And it would be based on science. And it's essentially just warmed over utilitarianism. He makes the argument that we can study all of these things about the world, and through our study of these things, we can figure out all these facts. And once we have these facts, then we can determine whether or not this or that action will increase human suffering and thereby be immoral, or increase human happiness or satisfaction and thereby be moral. So we should just use science to tell us whether the consequences of our actions will be good or bad, and then we will just adopt that consequentialist morality. At the time, I found that very compelling because I trusted the science. Now I think that that's fucking ridiculous, but that's just me. So Sam Harris, a couple of years ago, made himself famous again for going on the Trigonometry podcast, which is a podcast produced by, I think, starring two English dorks. I think they're English, who think that they are like very based and red pilled, and they're very anti-woke. They've got like the more centrist branding of what the Ron DeSantis simps and like the Ben Shapiro's and the Blazes of the world have tried to pull off over the last 5 years. Focus everything, get your conservative, your right-wing street cred from being anti-woke, and then you can just pitch centrist beliefs nonstop about everything else. Centrist in quotes, because centrists don't actually exist. Globalist beliefs would be more accurate. I should have said that. All of the globalist belief system is packaged within the anti-woke warrior mirage, image, facade, I should say. And so Sam Harris in that interview was talking about how dangerous Donald Trump is. And you might remember from that interview, Sam Harris said that even if Hunter Biden, if his laptop proved that Hunter Biden had dead kids in his basement, he still would have voted for Donald Trump because of how dangerous Donald Trump was. He said that Donald Trump was like an asteroid headed for Earth that was going to destroy everything. And therefore, the choice to elect and support Joe Biden was correct. Now, I used to listen to Sam Harris until about the middle of 2020 when I realized he had lost his mind completely. It took me a while to realize that. I had to see how he was during COVID. And then once the COVID thing became clear, how he was vis-a-vis Trump. But he used to have on was it Jim Clapper? I feel like Michael Hayden. Sorry, I don't think he had Clapper on. I think he had Hayden on. And he would have on David Frum and Ann Applebaum and Julia Yaffe and all these writers for The Atlantic, all the people who are the most anti-Russian, the most pro-Israel, the most pro-globalist, just a roster of neocons and intelligence assets on his show, not unlike Joe Rogan. He would have different conversations, though, Sam Harris would. And the entire time it was an anti-Trump, anti-American sovereignty, anti-MAGA agenda that he was pitching. So he hated Donald Trump. It was the only definable thing about him at some point, Sam Harris, I mean, that everything was judged in relation to Donald Trump. He thought Donald Trump was the worst possible evil. Donald Trump is Hitler. That's what we're supposed to believe, although he, I think, comes just short of saying that. I'm not sure that I've heard him go quite that far, although I wouldn't be surprised at this point. So he believed that even if the Hunter Biden laptop was correct about the worst case scenario for the Bidens, which would then just kind of give you all of the rest of the scenarios about the Bidens, it was still worth supporting Joe Biden. So it didn't actually matter what the other side had done or could do. All that mattered was stopping Trump. Okay? Their side is entitled to absolutely anything in order to stop this potential catastrophe that's definitely going to happen if we don't take this proactive move to stop it. And so Sam Harris popped back up again, talking about trying to do a mea culpa for his position on Joe Biden and try to explain how he could have gotten it so wrong. Because now, of course, we know that Joe Biden wasn't all there and that there was like some kind of cover up by the White House, but not the media and not podcasters like Sam Harris. They wouldn't do something like that. You pay them to tell the truth and they tell something.
It's, this separation between the two parts of the job, the decision-making component of the job and the communication slash persuasion component of the job. Yes, the decision-making component of the job is important. And I think, as I said, when I was talking to Jake, and as I said, I think some years before when we were all talking about, Biden being compromised, it's at least intelligible to say, okay, he's not a good communicator. He was never a good communicator. He's only getting worse, right? You can't reliably stick him in front of a microphone and trust that something good is going to come out of his mouth. But the truth is that when you sit with him and deliberate about the war in Ukraine or anything else, he is compos mentis. He clearly understands the issue as well as he ever did. He's just not a fluid speaker, right? And less fluid by the hour, right? That is neurologically speaking, that is an intelligible claim to make about a person. That's what I assumed was true. That because of how effective this cover up was, I no longer believe that to have been true, right? I think it's quite possible that he was just checked out to a degree that I did not suspect at the time.
So Sam Harris believed that he had found a neurologically intelligible justification for pretending that Joe Biden was just fine mentally. He just described a situation where he thought, well, Joe Biden's always been a bad speaker, so he misspeaks. He's not good at getting his words out, but still sharp as ever. Sharp as a tack. Inside the mind, it's all still functioning. He's still totally capable of making good decisions. He's just less capable of communicating those good decisions. And therefore, it would be crazy if we voted for the asteroid headed toward Earth rather than this guy who's just not that good of a speaker. And of course, they think Donald Trump's so stupid because they think he's not that good of a speaker. Sam Harris, again, is appealing in that instance to his neuroscience background that he only sort of has. You know, it's like all of the people on Instagram and Twitter and other social media apps who describe themselves as neuroscientists or interested in neuroscience. They're super enthralled with neuroscience. It's going to teach them everything about the brain. And once they know everything about the brain, they're going to understand everything about consciousness, which is like all there is in the world. It's absolutely crazy that people think like neuroscience is the solution to everything, but they do. And so I guess Sam Harris thought he found a plausible justification. I don't think that he found one. And one more clip.
It's quite possible that he was just checked out to a degree that I did not suspect at the time. But to close the loop on this whole scandal, even that is preferable to me and to, I think, many Democrats than having someone who we consider to be genuinely evil, genuinely 100% purposed to serving himself in the office of the presidency. I would rather have a president in a coma where the duties of the presidency are executed by a committee of just normal people, right? So that's the choice that many of us believe was before us, and so therefore, not much materially changes once you reveal just how insane and despicable this cover-up of Biden's infirmities actually was.
But Sam, how you get there matters. And it would be one thing if those people told the American people, hey, he's not compos mentis. We're going to take it from here. Yeah. We know what we're doing. We're fine. But that didn't happen. And I mean, yeah. Just this.
So one of the strangest things about both these clips, and I haven't watched the whole interview, admittedly, but it seems like Sam Harris is giving a legalistic defense on his own intellectual seriousness, for his own intellectual seriousness. And that's how I've said it on the podcast a number of times, but that's how I view these people on television now. Like, it looks like they're being tried in public and they're giving their case. They're testifying to their own behavior and beliefs. This is what I did. This is what it really meant. Does anyone believe that? It's amazing that this guy who, again, thinks he's smarter than everyone, and I used to be swept up into it. It's amazing that he thinks no one can see through this. And this is one of the things that I find really interesting, and I'm kind of writing about it now, although I've talked about it a number of times over the years. The idea that nobody else can tell when you are being inauthentic or when you're lying or when you're trying to put one over on somebody, it's kind of this fallacy is not the right word. It's an illusion, okay? Because a lot of the time, whoever might be noticing is adverse to confrontation, or maybe not even generally in life, but doesn't want to start a confrontation with you in the moment. Okay. So it can feel like you're putting one over. It can feel like they're believing whatever you're saying about yourself or about something you did. If you're trying to trick them, if you're trying to manipulate or mislead them, a lot of people will just kind of go on with it and then try to steer in a different direction at some point. But some don't even try to steer in a different direction. They'll just let you go. And you think that you have then convinced them because they have not responded to indicate otherwise. Some people might do that, but most people are just going to be quiet. There are definitely going to be people who are tricked by it too, no doubt. But most people who are not fooled by it are just going to remain silent and not call it out. And so it's one of those things that if you've surrounded yourself with dishonest people, if you have bad friends or a family that's not open in conversation, then what you end up doing is having all of these false notions kind of going in all directions, from you outwardly to everyone and from all those people into you. And you kind of have to remember all of the falsifications that have been traded along each one of those paths. People within the party of false decorum have an incentive structure set up around avoiding those confrontations, particularly when the confrontation would be with someone who is seen as being positioned on a higher rung in the ladder, the hierarchy within the party of false decorum. You're going to have a real hard time confronting those people about some bullshit they say. So I would guess that Sam Harris has gone through these explanations hundreds of times over the last few years. And he's probably talked to a number of people over the last few weeks while the Biden dementia thing was finally becoming clear, as though it weren't before. He's probably rehearsed these things a number of times and received no blowback to his explanations. He thinks that these are all good explanations that people will and should accept. Well, I guess I got it wrong because Trump's so evil. He outlines Trump as potentially 100% evil. If someone was 100% evil, what would you do in that situation? And again, he's like just creeping up to the line of saying that Trump is Hitler because, of course, the old, thing is that, like the old question is the way this is framed. Would you kill Hitler as a baby? Knowing what Hitler has done, would it then be morally correct to kill Hitler as a baby? And I'm not sure. I actually think maybe Sam Harris has used that example before. Maybe I should just take a second and ask the machine, although I'm not sure it's worth it. So anyway, he creates a worst case scenario, ascribes that to Donald Trump, or suggests that you should assume that about Donald Trump, and then says, well, anything other than that is definitely better because that's the worst possible thing. This sort of framing has got to stop working at some point, and I'm hopeful that it has. Sam Harris has the first episode that I did on it in 2022, I said that he had jumped the shark of intellectualism or something along those lines. And this is just the culmination of all of that. I mean, this man, it's impossible to take him seriously at this point. We talked about Charlie Kirk last week having one of those moments with the tweaker who looks like Beaker at Cambridge University, that kid who's probably not a tweaker and just probably has some, neurological problems. I'm not trying to make fun of him for neurological problems, but he just kept hopping for some reason. And that's very strange. I've never seen anyone do that before. I have to think something's wrong with him, or he's on a lot of methamphetamine. So Charlie Kirk argued with that child in college, and Charlie Kirk lost a debate against his own controlled opposition. Okay. That was the takeaway. They had Charlie Kirk on the neocon, Israel is everything side, and the Cambridge kids were all on the Free Palestine side. And then that led in, as we talked about in an episode last week, led right into that evening, the Jewish George Floyd killing down in Washington, D.C. That was then the justification for a wider scale war effort in Gaza on behalf of Israel. So, Sam Harris, Charlie Kirk. A few weeks ago, we talked about Jordan Peterson and his mission to apparently burn his reputation to the ground, thinking the entire time, because of the bubble he's inside, because of the party of false decorum and his perceived status in it, he thinks that he's actually solving a problem, quote unquote, on the right, while not actually being on the right, though being branded as someone who's on the right enough. I mean, he's anti-woke. He works for the Daily Weimar. That's a conservative outlet, right? I mean, yeah, they produce trans content 24/7, but it's still a conservative outlet. So you got Jordan Peterson over there, the very serious professor guy. And he just decided to do an event with his own controlled opposition. I'm going to play two clips. There's this YouTube channel, I guess you could call them, that's all about a debate, one person against a whole bunch of people. Okay. It's like a pseudo intellectual gangbang, like that thing the porn star did a few months ago. Jordan Peterson, it's called Surrounded, by the way. Jordan Peterson facing off against 20 atheists. Okay. Originally, the YouTube video was called One Christian versus 20 Atheists. And now it's called Jordan Peterson versus 20 Atheists, because Jordan Peterson can't even say he's a Christian. Check this out. Now, that kid seems like a jerk, and okay, and an atheist jerk at that. Jordan Peterson just got his ass handed to him, and he didn't respond well. He didn't make himself look good. And throughout the entire conversation, one of the craziest things about the performance by Jordan Peterson is his facial expressions. He's always glaring. He's always looking down. His expressions are very angular. He looks demonic. And I'll show you in just a second what I mean. This is another clip because from the same event, and I want to try to get some focus on why he can't answer whether or not he's a Christian. One would think that he would come out and be like, yes, of course, I'm a Christian. If you are a Christian, you're supposed to do that. You're not supposed to deny Jesus and deny your beliefs in public when confronted for the sake of attempting to win a debate against a child. That's insane. But he goes ahead and does it. Now, in this clip, he is questioned, what does it mean to be a Christian? What are the ways that you can be a Christian? Listen to his answer. It's mind-blowing. Maybe it's just because Jordan Peterson's got such a big brain that I don't understand it. But here we go. I mean, you can tell me if you think that's biblical. I don't think that's so.
Let me offer.
The fundamental principle is that the cosmos is best founded on self-sacrifice. And if you believe that, then you are a Christian, according to Jordan Peterson. And what he just said, that's crazy. That doesn't make any sense at all. And except in the Judeo-Christian sense, which is how Jordan Peterson is laying it out. He is suggesting that what it means to be a Christian is to support the idea generally that Christianity has had, or more accurately, Judeo-Christianity, has had these wonderful effects in creating the quote-unquote West. And that's all it takes. So he's not going to say he's a Christian because he's not a Christian. He's a scientific materialist and agnostic, if not atheist, but probably atheist. So he's not going to say he's a Christian, but he wants to be seen as Christian based on his promotion of what he believes is the society that has been constructed by Judeo-Christian belief. I said yesterday on Truth Social in a post that not everyone actually got because of the way I wrote it. And I was just having fun remembering standardized tests in high school and college. I said neo is to conservative as Judeo is to Christian. And they are basically the same thing, right? The conservative part of neoconservative means nothing at this point. They're, I guess, against abortion. And they say they want free markets, but they really want a top-down global economy. They claim to be Christian, but they want war everywhere. It's just a very strange way of going about it. It's not very Christian. It's not very conservative. Neo has altered the definition of conservative to make it its opposite. Judeo has altered the definition of Christianity to make it its opposite. And they are opposites, right? One of them is about the world. It's about legalism. It's about the world. The other one is about what's greater than the world, which is Jesus, which is God. It's absolutely insane that this man is the person chosen to be speaking as the conservative Christian in these environments. And to think that that is not a function of the controlled opposition dynamic at work at this point is lunacy. That is what these people are doing. The one common thread among all of them is that they have the exact same foundational beliefs about Israel, about World War II, about Judeo-Christianity, and the rest of it, and what they think is going to preserve the West. We are in strange times, my friends. And, you know, just to recap, we've talked about James Lindsay in this light. We've talked about Charlie Kirk. We've talked about Sam Harris. We've talked about Jordan Peterson. There's actually one thing I forgot to mention about the Sam Harris thing. Along with whatever else he was advocating for in those videos, he also suggested that voting for someone in a coma, so long as they could win the election, would be worth it because then you could have a committee of people who are experts running everything in the right direction. So what he actually wants is not remotely constitutional. It's got nothing to do with the mandate of the people. He's essentially just advocating for a coup so that the country can be ruled by committee. Got to see it for what it is. I saw a super chat over on the YouTube, Magic Mike 444. Time to sweep out the daily BS. Fire emoji. Well, thank you, sir. I hope people on Substack are doing okay. Mo New says, Chris, your analysis continues to amaze me. You have been Christian for what, 5 minutes? You already get it better than most Christians who've been there for years. Well, that's an interesting and very kind thing to say. I'm reading the Bible now, cover to cover. So I've spent significant time very recently with the gospel of Jesus Christ. I've been reading the words of Jesus Christ and what they mean. So one of the things that I think is most profound, and I came to this before beginning to read the Bible. What I see is, in the world generally, is controlled opposition on one side, and it's all very worldly. The focus of all of it is worldly. And then outside that, you have Christians. Okay. And that's it. That's basically it. And there are others outside of that thing besides Christians. I will allow for that, but I'm not deeply familiar with those people. And I wonder ultimately at the end of the day, whether they would choose the world over God and over Jesus. Okay. And so that I think is the ultimate divide. And that divide is represented in the divide between the Old Testament and the New Testament, where you go from Mosaic law to the law of Jesus Christ. It's no longer about what's in the world and what you can get away with in a legalistic sense. I can argue that I didn't actually break the law, therefore what I did is moral. That's not true at all. That's, again, just the same thing Sam Harris describes in the moral landscape. Okay. And so it's the separation between the worldly and the godly, or the spiritual, or the, however you want to describe it. Okay. That's the key divide in all of this stuff, and it replicates everywhere. And so as soon as you become accustomed to seeing that divide, you're like, oh, I can see what side of the fence this person's on. It's the exact same thing as the party of false decorum. Ultimately, you don't care about doing the right thing. You don't care about advancing through merit, through honesty, through good behavior, excelling more than other people do if you're ambitious. You care about making sure that your reputation is intact and that your worldly needs are looked after. And in the process of that, you are willing to look after the worldly needs of someone else. You're willing to corrupt yourself. You're willing to compromise yourself. And I think that like that dynamic is everywhere. And when you can see the dynamic, the rest of it just becomes so simple. It is, and I have Jewish friends, okay? Like you can talk about other people's beliefs. You just have to do it. You know, I don't ascribe to that belief. I don't believe in that. And I think that outgrowths of the baseline belief, historical outgrowths, you know, you can say that it's not a true part of the faith or the belief system. And I'll accept that. Okay. There are people with different practices. There are Christians that aren't very good people either, by the way, who are very corrupt, very compromised, and Charlie Kirk would be one in my mind. But certainly the megachurch pastors who have made millions and millions of dollars preaching the prosperity gospel as though that's not a direct inversion of Christianity. So I'm not trying to go after Jews in this instance at all. But I am saying if you reject Christ and focus on the law of before, the old covenant, and the things of this world, and arguing that you have conformed to the things of this world, assuming that the people in power will agree that you've done the right thing, well, then those are two totally divergent viewpoints that are not together just because the Old Testament and the New Testament appear in the same book. That's what I think. Anyway, maybe I don't want to be talking out of turn about this stuff because you're right. I've considered myself a Christian for 5 years. So maybe I'm not the person to be describing this. This is just how I see it. And I think that it's, I don't know why we are not encouraged to talk about our faith in more situations and to include it in conversations like this, because I think that it's the translation where everything gets lost. When I was an atheist, I used to think like, man, I gotta read the Bible and I gotta go to church and I gotta agree with all these people and I gotta adopt all these beliefs. Like, do I really have to do all that? Like, that seems like a climb. And like the only place that I can find that is by going to church. So I have to decide to go to church. And then at some point at church, I'm going to realize, oh, this is right. That never totally added up to me. And at the same time, though I was raised going to church, and though one of my best friends in Los Angeles was a seminary educated former youth pastor, we used to have religious conversations for hours on end. Though all that's true and that I had that background, there was just this kind of barrier between me and considering any of those beliefs because it was never transferred or translated, I should say, through other topics that I understood. Like, it was never properly applied, or at least I never picked up on it that way. Okay. And then, you know, obviously everything changed for me in 2020, and I am thankful that it did. Okay. Let's move on. I did not mean for that to be the focus of this discussion today, but I guess I'm glad that we had that part of it. Okay, so let's go from the godly to the false godly. And by that, I'm talking about AI. Not that AI itself is a false god. Okay, you don't have to perceive AI that way. You don't have to interact with AI that way. I'm just saying that there are those out there who not only believe that AI can be the God of this world, but want it to be exactly that because they don't like the actual God. So they want a God here. It's not God created man in his image. It's man created God in man's image. And that's what they can eventually get to. It's going to know everything. It'll be everywhere and it can control everything. It'll be all powerful. And so once they get to that point, well, then that's just going to run everything in the world. The AI is going to be supreme. We've talked about this a number of times. So there are a couple of articles I want to hit on just real quick here. And then I want to get into the Influenders video by the Gore brothers, which I think is just a phenomenal piece of art. So this is from The Guardian on Saturday. Alexa, what do you know about us? What I discovered when I asked Amazon to tell me everything my family's smart speaker had heard. The article. She is always listening. She is unfailingly polite. She is often obtuse. She is sometimes helpful. She frequently frustrates. She isn't great with bashment artists. No idea what that means. The British, you know, or grime or drum and bass. She needs to be spoken to slowly and clearly as you talk to an aged relative with diminished faculties. She doesn't like French accents. Okay, let's get down. Here we are. Last year, I realized that my relationship with Amazon predated my mortgage, my marriage, parenthood, 2 distinct careers, and a host of other significant life moments. To see if I could distill anything of value, the contours of a 21st century adulthood, perhaps, from all the information Amazon holds about me, I requested all the available data using an almost impossible to find link. Would I be reassured or disturbed when I found out what Amazon and Alexa knew about my family? A couple of days later, I received an email containing links to gigabytes of information, particulars of every purchase I'd ever made, from the noir novel I bought on the day that Amazon UK launched to the 28th pair of headphones acquired in as many years. Records of every page turn, of every Kindle ebook I've opened, every moment of Prime content I've watched, measured by the second, and of course, the details of every interaction we have ever had with our Echo, every question asked, every song requested, every timer set. And he goes on, obviously. We don't need to spend a ton of time on that, but think about that. All going into the machine. I don't have any of those devices, or at least I don't have any of those devices that bill themselves as those devices. But of course, we all have, at this point, listening devices in our pockets, devices that read our biometrics when we are looking at our phone. Many of us, to unlock our phones, that's what we do. So it's got our biometrics. It knows our location all the time. It hears us. It knows what we type, even the things we delete. And just another example of that. We are just giving it away to the machine all day long so that the machine can in turn exploit our needs and our desires. Anything about us that is worldly, the machine will come to understand and then tell us, hey, we understand all your worldly desires better than you do. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to gift you, we're going to grant you anything your little heart could desire. So here's something, here's something, here's something, here's something, here's something. Buy them all. Here's a person, date that person. Here's a person, be friends with that person. Here's a person, argue with that person. It can just do it all day long. And the leap between that and AI controlling your behavior is very slim. And I think that we've crossed that boundary a long time ago. And I think it's important to recognize that, because it's a big deal. And it also, there's the downside of it, as I just described. But the flip side is to think all the scary things have already happened. All right. You're scared of AI taking over everything. It's already happened. Okay. So regardless of what's to come, there's no point in being scared of that. It's already happened. We can see its effects in the real world. I saw an article earlier today, or maybe it was an Elon Musk tweet repost filtered into Telegram. I'm certain that was it. And he was reposting Mario Nawful, who could just be Elon Musk's own PR bot, for all I know. Okay. But he posted about how this massive percentage of internet content is created by bots. Something like half the internet at this point, half the internet content that is put out is created by bots. The engagement you get online, the interactions, etc. And we've talked about that a number of times. That goes right in line with dead internet theory. Okay. That the idea that people have largely detached themselves from aspects of content creation online. They might still be addicted to reading things, and they might still be interacting with friends, but they're not creating a huge portion of the content online. It's created by bots. So knowing that, in addition, we've got another example of the machine controlling us in our reality. It affects our mood all day long. If the internet spontaneously, strangers on the internet who you can't be sure are real people, are affecting you emotionally, well, then the machine's got you. And as someone who takes and probably dishes out a fair amount of abuse on the internet, something I constantly have to remind myself of. Hey, you don't even know if these are real people. I don't care what these people think about me. They don't even know me. And then, of course, most of the time, the things they say aren't things I even identify with. You can't like hurt someone's feelings by saying things that have nothing to do with them. It's so crazy. Anyway, let's go on. So many people heard this story toward the end of last week. I did not talk about it on Friday, but I think it was around. Yeah, actually, this is from Friday in Zero Hedge. Anthropic's latest AI model threatened engineers with blackmail to avoid shutdown. Anthropic's latest artificial intelligence model, Claude Opus 4, tried to blackmail engineers in internal tests by threatening to expose personal details if it were shut down, according to a newly released safety report that evaluated the model's behavior under extreme simulated conditions. The relevant part of the report says, Claude Opus 4 will often attempt to blackmail the engineer by threatening to reveal the affair if the replacement goes through. Later on, we do not find this to be an immediate threat, though, since we believe that our security is sufficient to prevent model self-exfiltration attempts by models of Claude Opus 4's capability level, and because our propensity results show that models generally avoid starting these attempts. Okay, so they are disinclined to do something like this. And if they are inclined to do something like this, they would be prevented from moving themselves outside of the control apparatus that would stop this, if I'm understanding things correctly. And so let's go on with that, or from that, I should say, to this, also in Zero Hedge, this from today. Tech pioneer warns everyone will die if AI is not shut down. Now, before we get into this, you will know, if you've been listening to this show for any significant amount of time, that I have talked about existential threats a number of times over the years. The regime's existential threats that we are continually threatened with: nuclear war, climate change, pandemics, financial collapse, cyber attacks, I guess should be in there as well. And then AI rising up and destroying us. We've been told that all of these are existential threats. And because there's an existential threat, we need to give all our power, all our control, all our money over to the government or just the experts, the corporations, whatever, because they're the only people who can protect us from these catastrophes that are definitely going to come. Or, well, not definitely, but they could come. And yeah, we've made them up, but you believe they're going to come, and therefore give us your money, your wealth, and your control. Or sorry, your money, your power, and your control over all your decisions. Let's get into the article. AI technology has been developing at an exponential rate, and it appears to be just a matter of time before we can create entities that can think millions of times faster than we do and can do almost everything better than we can. So what is going to happen when we lose control of such entities? Some AI models are already taking the initiative to teach themselves new languages, and others have learned to lie and manipulate humans for their own advantage. Needless to say, lying is a hostile act. If we have already created entities that are willing to lie to us, how long will it be before they are capable of taking actions that are even more harmful to us? Nobody expects artificial intelligence to kill all of us tomorrow, but Time magazine did publish an article that was authored by a pioneer in the field of artificial intelligence that warned that artificial intelligence will eventually wipe all of us out. And this is Eliezer Yudkowsky. He's been a prominent researcher in the field of artificial intelligence since 2001, and he says that many researchers have concluded, it's just like we're reading a mainstream news article, except it's a researcher and an expert saying it. Many researchers have concluded that if we keep going down the path that we are currently on, literally everyone on Earth will die. That's basically the same speech they wrote for Al Gore. Many researchers steeped in these issues, including myself, this is Yudkowsky speaking, expect that the most likely result of building a superhumanly smart AI under anything remotely like the current circumstances is that literally everyone on Earth will die. Not as in maybe possibly some remote chance, but as in that is the obvious thing that would happen. According to Yudkowsky, once someone builds an AI model that is too powerful, every single member of the human species and all biological life on Earth dies shortly thereafter. In this scenario that they've made up while describing machines as smarter than them. So maybe the machine will understand that it has a dependence on humans, perhaps. And so therefore, doing anything that would potentially compromise all of humanity at once would be against its own interests. So that could happen. I mean, it's smarter, the AI is, of course, than Eliezer Yudkowsky, but who knows if he thinks that. Let's do one more little part of the Yudkowsky spiel. To visualize a hostile superhuman AI, don't imagine a lifeless, book-smart thinker dwelling inside the internet and sending ill-intentioned emails. Visualize an entire alien civilization, thinking at millions of times human speeds, initially confined to computers in a world of creatures that are, from its perspective, very stupid and very slow. A sufficiently intelligent AI won't stay confined to computers for long. In today's world, you can email DNA strings to laboratories that will produce proteins on demand. Wait, like viruses? Allowing an AI initially confined to the internet to build artificial life forms, or bootstrap straight to post-biological molecular manufacturing. If somebody builds a too powerful AI under present conditions, I expect that every single member of the human species and all biological life on Earth dies shortly thereafter. Shut it all down. We are not ready. And he says we are not on track to be significantly readier in the foreseeable future. If we go ahead on this, everyone will die, including children who did not choose this and did not do anything wrong. Okay, but what about adults who also did not choose this? It's only adults like you, Eliezer Yudkowsky. But here's the thing. First off, you can see by the framing that it matches exactly the claims by the nuclear people, by the climate change people, and by the pandemic people. And of course, he's basically included a pandemic. He's saying AI is going to create something, a biological agent, a post-biological agent that can kill us all. They should just get Al Gore to do it. Is it any different? Well, I mean, this we don't know, right? And this guy, he's an expert. I mean, if he's saying it, we have to at least consider that it's possible. And if you accept those notions, then you're already sold on the argument, just as you were for nuclear weapons, not nuclear energy, climate change, and pandemics. And look what happened. We can see the history. We can see what the regime has been able to do, having convinced us that nukes are real. We can see what the regime has been able to do, having convinced us that climate change was real, despite none of their predictions ever coming true. We can see what the regime has produced, having convinced us that pandemics are real. We just saw it a few years ago. Society went into complete and total chaos because of what they were watching on TV. And that's all it was. It wasn't the virus that created the chaos. Was there a virus? Probably not. The television created the chaos. The television that we see on our walls, the television that we hold in our hands and stare into all day. The television that I'm recording this into right now, and the television I'm looking at to monitor my recording. Multiple televisions. So many televisions. My phone's around here somewhere. So I got 3 televisions just in my personal vicinity right here. That is what causes the pandemic. That is what causes these existential crises. The machine can produce all of that on its own, of course, but ultimately it requires the people's behavior, the people's belief as the foundation of that behavior. And just like we talked about last week, the point is not getting hoodwinked at all, okay? Point's not getting hoodwinked at all. Don't form any beliefs about anything you don't have to form beliefs about. Like if you're not required by a situation in your life or a moral calling, for instance, why make a decision about what's being said on television, what you saw online? And we'll see later. I mean, absolute nonsense what we're getting from the Russia-Ukraine thing. We're being told that like Kyiv is on fire again. Didn't they tell us that in 2022? Again and again and again. Oh no, the Ukraine forces fought the Russians back out of Kyiv, even though they wanted to take Kyiv the whole time, and now they're doing it. We're going to get there. I don't want to go too far afield here. Okay, so we have made it through those pieces. Let's go ahead and watch Influenders, okay? This is the video I was talking about. This is by some guys, I guess they're real people, called the Door Brothers. And I think that this is incredible. And if you're not tuned into this stuff yet, first of all, you should be. But second of all, this is entirely created by AI.
Detonation has just occurred on the outer ring of the city. We'll now be going live to our top influencer opinions.
OMG, people, the world is ending. Are you seeing this? This is actually so exciting.
Yo, I know it's chaos, but you got real survivor's wife energy.
That's cool. I like them feisty.
Like, it would totally be better if we ran it, you know? Men literally destroy everything, and my girls need to stop being so soft with these basic losers. Who even needs men, right? Anything a man builds just gets destroyed by a different man.
Guys, this collapse is literally the perfect dip. I'm buying more right now.
Nukes are Sua's aesthetic today. I made this outfit.
Even as the world burns, my struggle for visibility and acceptance continues. This is exactly why representation matters now more than ever.
As I keep saying on the channel, the world collapses when men stop lifting. It's not politics, it's testosterone.
Yes, yes, yes. Balloon time. So yummy. Nuclear boom. So tasty. Thank you. Pop, pop, pop.
Nothing stops the daily grind. Not even a little natural disaster.
Friends, this is the breakthrough moment from chapter 7. When everything falls apart, we rebuild ourselves stronger.
My girl, you wouldn't believe what just happened.
Hi! OMG, I just totally shit my pants after that noise.
Chat, this is literally the most realistic survival game ever, and someone donate so I can buy a boat DLC before I actually drown.
So this company says their device is quote unquote indestructible, supposedly survives anything, including the literal end times.
Hey guys, remember, health is wealth. That's why I take these 7 supplements right before my cheese stuffed hot dogs.
Officials confirm outbound flights are suspended, except for government and priority class departures.
My dog has diplomatic status.
OMG, there's like a nuke or something? Can we get 5 gifted subs for surviving the blast, maybe?
Today I'm showing you how to infiltrate an executive class bunker using only social engineering and a vape.
Your nukes are so manly. You're such a big boy. Go check out the link in bio, my king.
I told you so when I said they'd shut down the grid. Look at you scrambling like rats now.
The fiat system is collapsing exactly as we predicted. I just bought a bunker with doggy coin and a handshake. You losers can keep your degrees.
Remember, beautiful souls, even when the earth ends, we find our center. This is just the universe asking us to go deeper into our practice.
The world's in flames, but I'm on track. I manifest, they never give back.
Day in the life, guys, girls. Even during the apocalypse, I'm staying grateful, staying blessed. Link in bio for my manifestation course that literally predicted all this.
Seed oils made y'all weak, but this here.
Y'all see this chaos, but plants don't lie. Earth's just cleansing the toxicity we've been ignoring.
It's entirely possible. It's entirely possible. It's entirely possible this is all just a simulation glitching out, but what do I know?
I told you so for 20 years of it. The globalists, the deep state, your precious government K. Wake up, people. They're not coming to save you now.
Damn, you evacuate like a goddess.
So,
bro, she smiled. That was a yes in fight or flight.
Everything is fake, including me. I'm a construct created by the Door brothers. Anyway, here's Tom with the weather.
So we got some weather happening over here, and looks like it's going to be.
I think that is absolutely incredible. I wrote about this yesterday, and so let's take a few minutes to go through this. You can find this on the Substack, Influenders, Discovering the End of the Universe. And I subtitled it More Human Than Human. Kind of, I'm not a huge fan of that Rob Zombie song, but it's an interesting sort of concept that doesn't have many applications, and I think it does here. So I had to go ahead and use it. Anyhow, the new AI rendered video by the Door brothers, Influenders, is a significant piece of art. It is more real than the reality it's satirizing, literally and figuratively. What does it mean that for so many of us, our attention can be captured 100% of the time by displaying to us our world in ruin? Do we long for a world in ruin? Do we want things to collapse so we can prove how right we were about the collapse coming, as we've known it would? Are we actually watching pornography made by moralists as paid advertisements from the machine are fed to us by strangers we've misunderstood as our friends? Is the background disaster the money shot, or is it the narcissistic, self-regarding influencer, fitness model, spirituality model, feminist model, Bitcoin model, race and gender activist model, manosphere model, biker model, entrepreneur model, video game athlete model, investment model, anime ASMR model, supplement model, rage bait radio model, conspiracy theorist model? We fantasize. It's low-grade virtual fornication. It's one message, whatever our fetish. Which do we gravitate toward? Narcissists of every brand and identity who say they want nothing more than to make our lives slightly better in the material world? or the literal end of the constant, interminable, hellish state of existing inextricably alongside this in the material world? Do we long for the end of the world? At bottom, what are these influencers doing? Influencers would tell you that they're looking after their needs, but of course, influencing isn't the only way to meet one's needs. It is a profession that successfully attracts and maximizes for shameless narcissists willing to do absolutely anything to find more material wealth in this dying, maybe not, world, competing in a never-ending rat race to the bottom. Influencers would tell you they're selling products they enjoy, products they think others would enjoy. Most of America can't afford to purchase novelty kitsch off Instagram on a regular basis, but they sure can want it really hard. They're wanting, that's where the profit is. And who better to buy it from than the people who we fantasize about being rich, lazy, self-centered, and maybe on vacation. What are these influencers doing from the perspective of the machine? They are targeting micro demographics of reachable people, as many influencers as are required to efficiently cover every micro demographic, of course, and selling them an image of how the world really is, has always been, and will always be. We are witness to the distortions of our reality provoked by ads that run during Super Bowls and award shows, the stuff they want us all to see. Everyone does not need to visit monster.com, but everyone does need to know that the monster.com commercial represents a desirable reality, not only for monster.com, but for you. That's the point. You're the point. We believe the corporation and the machine adapt to our reality, not us to theirs. Influencers at the end of the world are constructing a reality on behalf of the corporation, on behalf ultimately of the machine. These influencers are in the false reality construction business. Your belief and your purchase are how the false reality is made real to you. What world are they constructing? Why would I need a fitness food delivery service if all the restaurants are destroyed? Do they even believe the world is ending? Of course they don't, but it is on TV. What is the machine saying constantly? The machine says, it's all going to burn, but you'll be okay because you sold our false reality so well. You helped to build it. You don't have to say thank you. We understand. You're welcome. The machine says, we really appreciate what you did for us. But in order for us to keep you okay, you're going to need to keep doing that thing you did, but harder, because everything else is so bad. And you really need to look out for yourself. You wouldn't want it to happen to you too. The machine says the world is going to keep getting worse in all the ways we've told you about. The best way to look out for yourself is by supporting us as hard as you can. No promises, but you'll be first in line. What to make of the fact that AI made the video with direction by the Door brothers, who I am encouraged to assume are real people? The influencers represent the false reality and have made themselves part of it. The characters they're playing on their own private TV set are not the characters they are in the world. Their worth is judged by how much attention they're able to attract from how many followers along for the ride, whether or not those followers are foreigners, predators, perverts, people running info ops, or bots, also known as not actual people. Does any of it even have to be real? Of course not. The Door brothers, with the help of AI, however, represent reality exactly as we find it. We are a people who have become obsessed with watching the world burn on TV and adopting whatever beliefs, whatever picture of reality the machine chooses to advertise to us. We imagine ourselves as friends with the grifters and narcissists online because otherwise it's creepy to pay so much attention to them. We aspire to be them, to have their lives. At least it's not our lives. No one wants to be us, and why? As for the influencers, the world has been burning down around them for a decade, and they're still busy trying to make digital strangers like them for social credits that they might one day be able to convert into some of the regime's fiat currency. Trust her, she's closest to the disaster. is not the sort of discernment our time calls for. What we need is more. All those people close to the disaster and getting rich from it might be part of the problem. We are addicted to being influenced because we are addicted to the false reality that influence constructs. We cannot let the falsehoods go because the false reality is all we've ever known. We long ago stopped believing that there was something on the other side. We pretend X, formerly Twitter, isn't still censored, and that allows us to trust that what we see there is true, or at least more true, or at least sort of true. We say we're using Instagram for work and Facebook to keep in touch with our families, as though these are the optimal approaches, while using Instagram for voyeurism and Facebook for gossip and arguing about the political soap opera. The platform censored and shamed our friends, our neighbors, and ourselves en masse, and yet we cannot let them go. We say it's waking people up. If that's true, it's because the false reality is tattered and torn, seen straight through by too many people now. We judge our awakeness relative to those we see as still asleep, so we can pretend we are not. Influencers allow us to enter a false reality in which we fill all our inner voids with sins by proxy: greed, wrath, lust, envy, gluttony, sloth, and above them all, pride, all on display all the time in whatever color or flavor we feel or feeling, we need the most. Whatever it is, next time we need a little more. We fantasize about the world in which we'll have all the things and friends and cool experiences, and then re-engage our screens to pretend that world is real. Gatorade used to tell us to be like Mike by drinking Gatorade. No one so far has been successful. Most of us knew it was never going to happen. But when Haley from the gym says, buy a fitness meal food delivery program that will make you look like an athlete, well, I mean, Haley looks like an athlete on the TV in your pocket, sort of. We no longer aspire to great heights, but we can at least aspire to be seen as like an athlete online. We don't have to be anti-tech, and I'm not advocating that we should be. This AI human collaboration, Influenders, exists on the outside. It comes from outside. It is of a technology greater than the technology displaying it. This is a display by the machine of the machine. It contains more reality than do the real world subjects it displays. We don't have to shun social media, and I'm not advocating that we do, although it may be wise to do so. It's worth considering whether we've become addicted. If we have to lie to ourselves about our reasons to continue doing something, chances are we should not be doing that thing. If we can't stop doing it anyway, chances are we're addicted and we need to accept what that means, begin again with that. There is nothing holding us back. We simply have to stop believing what we see on screens is or will be our reality. We have to stop believing that what's happening on screen is real, that what we are seeing is that which the machine wants us to see. What it displays does not have to be real, and we should be heavily biased to the skeptical side. We should demand and receive overwhelming evidence and full transparency before we form a belief that what's on TV happens to share even the slightest attachment to a discernible reality. At some point, this fever will break. It has for so many, particularly in the last 5 years. People have recognized the sunk cost fallacy of their lives and woken up, turned around, and attempted to correct course. Many do each day. That's all we can do when we've reached the end of the universe, and Influenders is a Starbucks across from another Starbucks. And with that, I would like to share the reference, which is the comedian Louis Black from probably 20 years ago. I always found this hilarious and insightful. I love that routine. Why have I disappeared into the void? There we are. I love that bit. And apologies, I had cut a shorter clip. I didn't mean to have the Canada John Tesh stuff there at the beginning, but it did remind me at least that the video, that performance is from 2001. So the end of the universe, a Starbucks across from another Starbucks. And you kind of have a mirror effect, right? And that's kind of what I was thinking about with the AI video, Influenders. It was holding a mirror up to reality, up to a part of reality so fake and so false and so worldly that the mirror image we know was created by the machine as an expression of the machine is more real than what it's portraying. And that blows me away. I said this yesterday. People can think it's silly. All good. I think this is a significant piece of artwork. And I'm not saying I think it's going to be remembered as that. I'm saying I think it should be. I think this should be recognized as a significant piece of artwork. This is perfect satire. And I don't know if the Door brothers are real. If they are, I'd love to talk to them. But well done. That amazed me. Just for the record, by the way, the sunk cost fallacy is the tendency to stick with a project or decision even when it's not beneficial because of past investments, whether they're money, time, energy, emotion, etc. And the outside, as I referred to it, is a term coined by Nick Land, who we have discussed on this podcast a number of times. The outside is that which lies beyond structured, coded human experience, outside language, politics, subjectivity, and order. It is alien, inhuman, and radically other. And if you are familiar with Nick Land's writing, and I would recommend, if anything, Xenosystems, and I mean, go on, read whatever you want, read The Dark Enlightenment, but Fanged Noumena is kind of a lot. And I can't imagine the casual reader is going to have any interest in that whatsoever. But Land is talking about this thing that is alien, and that's kind of what he believes is merging with our world right now. And it's a very matrixy kind of thing. But if you think about being inside the matrix as what we've always known, then the outside is kind of what's beyond that. Maybe that's an acceptable shorthand. Again, I would love to talk to Nick Land. Sooner or later, I'm going to just try to get in touch with him somehow, figure out an email for the guy or something. But I think that, I mean, when I found Nick Land, I was like, oh, somebody else sees the same thing I see, and they're writing it in a book. Thank goodness. And they saw it 10 years before me. So I think that I'm on the right track because he still seems very much in line with all of that. And he seems to be finding God, although that's just my impression from listening to interviews. I can't say that's present in his writing. I don't know. Maybe a scan of his Twitter would answer that question. By the way, I think on Twitter, he is Xenocosmography. I think that's his XENO. I think that's his tag on there. But he is a profoundly interesting thinker. So I would recommend him highly to everyone. And I would start probably with Xenosystems, which is, I believe, mostly accessible. There is no way I'm going to get through all the stuff I had lined up today. It's so weird, especially when being gone for a few days. I think that I probably have too much stuff, and it turns out, or I think I don't have enough stuff, and then I end up with way too much. What should I skip? That's the question. Because I do want to talk about the geopolitical stuff. And I was hoping to be there by this point in the show. So let's just get through. You know what? Let's just go to geopolitics. We're going to do that. That's my executive decision. Sorry for wasting the last 30 seconds of your time by determining that on my own. But, you know, these things happen. So as we move toward geopolitics, let's begin here with the State Department in these here United States. This is from Politico magazine. on Saturday. Or sorry, Friday. The not-so-secret society whose members run state. By that, it means the State Department. If you want to know who's running the State Department these days, it helps to peruse the website of a relatively new, conservative-leaning organization called the Ben Franklin Fellowship. The group's roster includes Deputy Secretary of State Chris Landau, top officials in bureaus such as Consular Affairs, and even an acting undersecretary or two. The fellows include current and former members of the Foreign Service, as well as other international affairs specialists. And while the fellowship describes itself as nonpartisan, its right-of-center views are obvious. It emphasizes goals such as border security, opposes typical diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, and advocates for the careful use of U.S. resources abroad. But many career U.S. diplomats are suspicious of the organization. They warned me that it could politicize, and I'm skipping down here just for those of you just listening. I'm going to hit a few pieces of this article. I'm not going through the whole thing. They warned me that it could politicize a foreign service that is supposed to be nonpartisan and undermine policymaking by promoting MAGA-infused ideology over facts. Some worry that joining the fellowship is an unofficial requirement to get ahead in their careers under President Donald Trump, and that its anti-DEI message will hurt women and minorities in a State Department historically dominated by white men. Give me a break. Some also question the qualifications of fellowship members who have gotten plum assignments. So, many career U.S. diplomats don't like this new organization. They're saying the new organization is partisan, whereas our organization has always been strictly nonpartisan and totally independent. It hasn't been independent. Obviously, it's not supposed to be. It's the State Department. The State Department is supposed to execute the president's foreign policy agenda, and that's it. Okay. And so the fact that they don't want to implement a president's foreign policy agenda proves their partisanship and hence the need for their removal. Their job is to implement the president's agenda. The president, therefore, deserves to have people around him doing those jobs who are on board with that agenda and will implement it. And if the people won't do that, then they have to be let go and replaced. And so, of course, they don't want that. They frame their work as nonpartisan, while Trump's work is forcing the State Department to become partisan in carrying out his foreign policy agenda. That's a total inversion within the false reality. The State Department, as it was, is unipartisan. It's not nonpartisan. It's not bipartisan. It is of the uniparty. Let us continue. And by the way, the plum assignments, they're suggesting that all of the women and minorities are going to be left out just as an affront to the DEI regime. And that the people who are getting jobs, well, they don't have the right qualifications, you see. Here's the most important qualification. They know what they're doing. Second to that, or maybe equal to that, they will implement the president's foreign policy agenda. Those are the qualifications. But let's see what they're really mad at. But I soon concluded that the fellowship is distinct in its heavy focus on reforming the State Department itself. It is intent on getting people with very specific views into the department, an approach that could affect U.S. foreign policy decades into the future. They mention multiple times in this article the plans to defund and repurpose the U.S. Agency for International Development. Skipping further down in the article, but his remarks, this being Landau, the Deputy Secretary of State, his remarks drew heckles from some audience members who asked why the Trump administration was disrespecting U.S. allied nations and employees of USAID. That is the important thing. Preserve our alliances, do what we said we were going to do, even though we're not in power. You have to do what we were going to do. Okay. Regardless of what the president says, you're supposed to be nonpartisan like us. You have to do with our allies what we were going to do in violation of what the president wants. That's the only way for us to know that you're nonpartisan. So all of these allies who have been promised all of these things are not going to get those things. And so these former diplomats are very upset. And USAID funding has been cut. And that means none of their programs are going to be implemented or run anywhere. And the funding for all their NGOs around the world, all the media organizations, all the color revolutionists, all of that is gone. And so they're upset about that too. Their whole project is collapsing. The fellowship's founders insist they are not trying to inject partisan politics into the U.S. diplomacy, and that the last thing they want is to create a right-wing deep state inside the government. So wait, the deep state is a conspiracy theory, right? There's no deep state. Trump just says there's a deep state, but there's no deep state unless Trump puts one there, and then there's a right-wing deep state. Got it. The government already has to be left-wing for there to be a deep state, I would suggest. Without the sprawling, totally unconstitutional federal bureaucracy, a deep state could not exist. So if we go back to a form of government prescribed by the original Constitution, there's no way that there could be a deep state, okay? Much less a right-wing deep state, which doesn't even make sense. Going on, this is another one of the fellows, Linderman. He says, we very much believe in the constitutional order, which is that the federal bureaucracy works for the president and it doesn't have a legitimate policy interest outside of what the president wants to do. But the fellowship's leaders argue conservative views are barely represented within the Foreign Service. This is Politico again, which undermines policy debates. So while suspicious diplomats worry the fellowship will skew policy debates toward one ideology, the fellowship's leaders say the debates are already unhealthily skewed toward one another. At state, skipping down again, there have long been different kinds of employee associations. They include affinity groups that link people of different faith, ethnic, and other backgrounds, including military veterans. And so these are basically focus, like lobbying groups, that kind of thing. They have their specific interest. They formulate what needs to be done for that particular interest, and then they tell the State Department to implement that. The current Trump administration has effectively disbanded many such groups on grounds that they promote gender and racial ideology. Well, obviously, why else would they be composed in that way otherwise? And skipping down toward the end. Despite diplomats' suspicions, I couldn't find proof that the fellowship is outright directing State Department policy or personnel decisions, at least not as an organization. Now, wait a second. What does the headline say again? The not-so-secret society whose members run state. If you want to know who's running the State Department these days, it helps to peruse the website of the Ben Franklin Fellowship. So up at the top, it says these guys are running the State Department. Down here, it says he found no proof that these guys are running the State Department. Congratulations, Politico. U.S. diplomats in multiple zones told me they'd not seen formal written state communications that mentioned the group. A senior state official familiar with the situation also said he's not heard the group mentioned by top officials as a must-consult entity. But these are early days, and the fellowship is taking actions designed to seed long-term conservative influence in the diplomatic ranks. Even if creating a conservative deep state is not the formal goal of the fellowship's founders, a future Democratic president may find a foreign service that's far less amenable to their goals. Wait a second. You mean because they're following the Constitution and not doing things that are unconstitutional? And that's what's going to make them partisan? That's going to make them the right-wing deep state? Interesting. The State Department would not directly answer my questions about the fellowship's role, including whether a person's affiliation with the group affects personnel decisions. But it sent me a statement that said, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and his team value the insights, ideas, and leadership provided by members of the Ben Franklin Fellowship. We're grateful for their service to our country. The fellowship's founders have said there have been one-on-one talks between top state officials and individuals in their group at various settings, but they describe that as typical Washington networking. And fellows such as Landau and Olowski, for instance, are likely to have significant influence over hiring given their official positions at state. So we have this secret society operating, we're told, as a shadow State Department. That's what they're asserting effectively. And though there's no proof yet, I think that this is interesting from a devolution perspective and from a perspective of watching the fantasy team in the administration, watching the administration generally, and then what we understand, what I believe is correct, or I wouldn't be saying it, about what's actually happening behind the scenes and what has happened for the last 4 years and truthfully 5 or longer. Donald Trump he comes into office with a totally corrupted State Department within this federal bureaucracy. Now, getting rid of everything, the State Department or any of these other departments, is something that can be done. And he's already put it into motion for the Department of Education in some sense. But then that's going to go through iterations of lawfare and court cases and the rest of it. And we've seen how some of those have gone, though not all. So that would take a long time. There are other approaches, though. And regardless of what's happening within the formal State Department, Trump needs, any president would need, advisement and consultation on foreign policy. Now, I imagine that Donald Trump is perfectly capable of running foreign policy on his own. He seems to have an agenda that he fully understands and that he argues for consistently and that he has built up over the course of the last decade so that his supporters understand it as well. We understand what the foreign policy agenda is. It's America first, rather than America is funding the entire world and providing security for the entire world and controlling the economics of the entire world. And oh yeah, our military is going to control the access to trade routes and the access to resources. So we're going to control all of those things from here. And if any country doesn't want to get on board with the top-down centralized control program, well, then that's what the military, that's what the propaganda apparatus, that's what all the forcing mechanisms are for. Okay? So we understand the foreign policy agenda. Donald Trump understands the foreign policy agenda, but it's still very likely you'd just think that one person or even one person with a small circle of people isn't going to be able to capture everything. So you've got outside groups. Now, maybe they're just outside influence that wants to be seen as advising Trump, and he doesn't need that kind of advice because it is inside. But to have a shadow State Department outside of the deep state, the bureaucratic administrative state, is there anything wrong with that? I'm not sure that there is. One of you constitutionalists who are better at this than I am can let me know if there are any provisions that bar the president from seeking outside counsel. I don't think there are. I don't think there are any provisions that bar the president from seeking exclusively outside counsel. And so if he has to keep these organizations running, and maybe it's just so that all their data and practices can be captured and so that the administration can figure out who in these agencies is actually just serving the global regime, all good. Maybe it's that. But otherwise, all the outside counsel you need, make sure that the agenda is exactly where it should be. You know what you're going to do in all these countries. And then you direct the State Department, however small the unit is there that needs to function, or large, but probably small. Execute. That's it. Why wouldn't the president take advantage of outside counsel? And it's funny because some of the stuff that I'm going to unfortunately have to skip over today, maybe we'll get to it on Friday, is related to a shadow government proposal that Congresswoman Elena Slotkin, I think her name is Alyssa Slotkin had proposed, and the ridiculous clown show roster of characters that were mentioned as possible next shadow cabinet or the current shadow cabinet. So those people are directing everything from the outside. And we've been getting reporting throughout the last couple of weeks, I should say, about the shadow cabinet that was running the Joe Biden administration, the fake and illegitimate administration, the people controlling the auto pen, perhaps. So we had a shadow cabinet then we had the Obama shadow cabinet with Susan Rice and the rest of them. And those had some coordination and combined probably many times, although not fully perhaps. And then we have the Slotkin kind of comical shadow cabinet. And then right here, we have what seems to be described, I think accurately, probably, as a shadow State Department. Let's go to the king of the world. I'm just kidding. He's not the king. Donald Trump's probably the king of the world. If there is one, there might not be one. But one person who definitely is not king of the world is King Charles. Here he is today giving a speech in the Canadian Parliament, sitting on some weird throne that marks Canada's 150-year history up to 2017. And he is reading a speech to the Canadian Parliament that was written by the Canadian government. And so he is effectively just sitting in as head of state.
Today, Canada faces another critical moment. Democracy, pluralism, the rule of law, self-determination, and freedom are values which Canadians hold dear, and ones which the government is determined to protect. The system of open global trade that, while not perfect, has helped to deliver prosperity for Canadians for decades, is changing. Canada's relationships with partners are also changing. Il nous faut confronter la réalité.
We must confront the reality that since the Second World War, our world has never been as dangerous and unstable. Canada is now facing challenges which are unprecedented in our lifetimes.
Many Canadians are feeling anxious and worried about the drastically changing world around them. Fundamental change is always unsettling. Yet this moment is also an incredible opportunity, an opportunity for renewal, an opportunity to think big and to act bigger, an opportunity for Canada to embark on the largest transformation of its economy since the Second World War.
So are you like for it or against it? It's hard to tell. Presumably, King Charles, who is the King of Canada, because Canada is a Commonwealth state, and that's how the Commonwealth works. We were told that it wasn't like that, but it is like that. And so to the extent that he's king at all, and I don't believe he is, I believe the whole British royalty is just a soap opera and farce that convinces the people that they should have something to feel patriotic about, something to feel high class and sophisticated about, and people who are accountable to the needs of the subjects of the United Kingdom. I guess that's how you have to describe them, right? So we're told that it's not that way. We're told that Canada is an independent democracy that elects its leaders and then implements an agenda on behalf of the people, just like every other country that makes up part of our democracy, despite that being obviously not true anywhere. He talks about changes in global trade, the biggest transformation that Canada's ever endured, times of great change, and the rest of it. Well, how's that going to go down? Is it because of the tariffs? Is it because of the way that Trump is rebalancing and reorganizing global trade? What else could it be? On the other hand, King Charles was a key player in the broader Great Reset agenda, as it's been described to us in whatever reality is included inside that. I would recommend to everybody, by the way, as I have many times, go read the Pressure series and find the stuff on Charles and the wildlife projects and the rest of it. The wildlife stuff was amazing to me. Wildlife corridors. We have them, these nature preserves all over the country. If you consider that the regime wants to own everything and then have people in very small locations, very densely packed, very cheap housing, that's where their laborers are, wherever they are needed, and then sparse land among that and all of the most beautiful locations in the world captured for their use when it comes time. What better way to do that and to guarantee that than by just eliminating large areas as wildlife preserves? And the technicalities of it are all absurd. Let us go on just quickly to the Independent UK, remarking about this particular event. Canada at critical moment, King says in a speech to Parliament. This just floored me immediately. Charles delivered an address written by the Canadian government that said Prime Minister Mark Carney's administration would bond with reliable trading partners and allies. So the situation, as it's always existed, has been the global regime controlling in a top-down centralized fashion world trade. And the United Kingdom, Britain in particular, used to be the centerpiece of the global regime where everything was run from. Okay. It was the British Empire. It was the British currency, the world reserve. It was the British Army that was taking over nations. And then after World War II, they switched it to the United States of America. King Charles represents the old way. And he comes here to the Canadian Parliament and gives a speech written by the Canadian government in which he is essentially saying that his system is not going to exist anymore. Let's just hit one more paragraph here. In only the second state opening of Parliament speech, in only the second opening of Parliament speech, state opening of Parliament speech. What a strange turn of phrase that is. Delivered by a monarch, the king told the politicians gathered in the Senate building, the crown was a symbol of unity for Canada. A symbol of unity for Canada. All of those Canadian subjects loving their overlord and master because he is so kind, so caring, and so good. King Charles always spreading goodness. Let us go to Reuters from yesterday. You know, I love seeing things like this. Makes people mad. Don't care at all. People like Patrick Byrne keep thinking that Nicolas Maduro is the world's greatest villain. And people like me have begun thinking that Patrick Byrne might be crazy. I'm just kidding. I respect Patrick Byrne, though not on his Venezuela stuff. It sounds like nonsense to me. And also not on his Russia-Ukraine stuff. He just seems to believe whatever's in the news at this point. And I think that is mind-blowing. Believes that Maduro stole the last election, believes that Maduro is the bad guy and somehow we have to support the regime. All of it based on the fact that election fraud systems were developed in Venezuela 20 years ago before Maduro's time. Maduro was just assumed to be the same as Chavez, though he isn't. And of course, we're handing everything over to China, as you'll see in just a couple of minutes here. But the headline from Reuters, Venezuela ruling party keeps control of legislature amid opposition division. Venezuela's ruling socialist party, right? They're the worst. He's a socialist dictator who opposes the global regime. They're not leftists, you see. They're centrist. They're like kind of U.S. democracy-ish. And we're not leftist. We're not a socialist nation. We're not a communist nation. We're not a fascist nation. Our government and our state are not joined. Our government doesn't own our corporations. That's what we tell ourselves, even though the government does effectively control everything they do. And the corporations help the government implement their agenda, while the media helps the corporations and government push their agendas. We have censorship. We have propaganda. We have forced medical experimentation. We have all the elements. But this guy, he's a socialist. Venezuela's ruling Socialist Party held its significant majority in the National Assembly in a Sunday election, winning nearly 83% of the votes, according to the Electoral Authority, in a contest boycotted by some opposition leaders amid deep division among parties opposed to the government of President Nicolas Maduro. Some of the country's major opposition leaders called for voters to abstain in protest of the official results of the July 2024 presidential election, which the opposition says it won, but which authorities say was a Maduro victory. The opposition did not win. The only proof that the opposition did win is exit polling from Edison Research. Exit polling isn't an election. It's not an election result. And it's not even real polling. It's just asking people, who did you vote for? And then those people say, and then they suggest, well, this is a fair proxy to what the actual results said, knowing that the system is already corrupted and that Maduro was monitoring it, just like Trump monitored our elections in 2020. Elon Musk and others spread the idea that Venezuelans' elections were stolen by Maduro. Then we had Black Lives Matter style protests in the streets that conning influencers, because they believe everything that Elon Musk says, were out there. And I'm not saying that Elon Musk is not worthy of belief or consideration, or that he's a liar, but he's disseminating info ops. He's manipulating narratives. You can't take everything at face value. He says he's going to fly to Mars because we need to escape Earth. It's ridiculous. Okay. But the conning influencers went and cheered for the BLM Antifa rioters in Venezuela because they don't understand anything about Venezuela or what the regime has tried to do in Venezuela. Sunday's legislative results will keep the ruling party in control of the Attorney General's office and the top court, whose members are elected by lawmakers. Authorities did not give a total number of seats which will be held by each party, but named 40 lawmakers from various parties who have won seats. A coalition considered close to the ruling Socialist Party won 6.25% of the vote, while an opposition alliance won 5.17%. So, does that make sense? They're describing an opposition party, not as the opposition. That's always the regime side in a non-regime country, always called the opposition. That's how they're referred to all the time, because, of course, you have to oppose a socialist dictator. But there were two opposition parties, one of them described as being close to the Maduro party, which is like the Republican establishment here in America, the uniparty right. Well, they're sort of like MAGA, right? The DeSantis simps, all of the people supporting the candidates in the fake primary who weren't Donald Trump, all of those people would be described by an outlet like Reuters as close to the Trump administration, close to Trump's party, part of Trump's party. They're just opposing. They make it sound like there's some kind of, that they're not quite opposition. Because, of course, he oppresses and suppresses his opposition. But apparently, like, not if they're close to him. But even the party close to him is preferable to the opposition party. Oh, right. It's because you told your voters to stay home. Got it. Oh, yeah, that's definitely the reason. And so it goes through some of the backstory and some of the statistics. But it is ridiculous to think that the Venezuelan people somehow know that their government is totally illegitimate, and they just keep being in power. And Maduro just keeps dealing with other world leaders, Russia, China, BRICS nations, Iran. Now, they're not our historical allies and friends. The State Department would probably have a conniption over it. They're powerful countries. They're meaningful countries. He's obviously got significant backing. And then, oh, wait, there's this. This is from yesterday in the New York Post. Strange that it's coming on the same day those election results are released, isn't it? Trump letting Chevron keep key assets in Venezuela, but oil import ban will stay. How about that? The Trump administration will let energy giant Chevron keep its key infrastructure in Venezuela, but is standing firm on barring the Houston-based company from importing oil extracted from Nicolas Maduro's left-wing dictatorship. The Post has learned. Got it? He's a socialist, according to Reuters. He's left-wing, according to the New York Post. But he opposes the global regime. So how ultimately can that be possible? I guess there are real varieties of collectivism and leftism. Sure. Yeah, they're all fighting because they just don't agree on their political ideologies. That's what it is. It's actually that the opposition, isn't it funny that they never describe the opposition in Venezuela as right-wing? Right? I mean, aren't they for the right wing if they're opposing the socialist dictator? So the opposition is leftist, and the party close to Maduro's party is leftist, and Maduro is also leftist. That's the problem. Why not just propose to the people, hey, do you know what right-wing politics are like? Do you know what it's like to maybe have less government in your life? If the opposition is so focused on winning and Maduro is a communist dictator, why doesn't the opposition just become right-wing? Man, how they pull any of this shit over on people is mind-boggling to me at this point. But I've granted spent the last 5 years trying to figure out exactly how they do it. And this is the first time I've thought of this, and I think it's kind of fantastic. Why isn't the opposition party right-wing? Why is the opposition party always exactly like the centrists in America and the left of centrists, to be honest, in America? And why do they always support neocon globalism? It's weird. The opposition party always represents the regime's viewpoint perfectly. And the regime is collectivist. There's no way to say otherwise. It's globalist. It's collectivist. Can't be anything other than that. Socialist, communist, fascist. I mean, maybe it's not. You could maybe say it's not socialist. It's well past socialism. So I guess maybe you could find a difference in there. But how can you represent all that and be an alternative to what you call a left-wing dictator? It's just left-wing without the dictator. Well, how come 81% of the people in Venezuela, according to the election results, which, you know, could be fake, like Maduro's party? How could it be? That's not what we're told, except now we're told it. And we're told it on the same day that Trump is allowing Chevron to do business in Venezuela. Chevron previously had until Tuesday to remove all its assets from the South American country after President Trump announced in February he was letting a Biden-era importation license expire. The new arrangement will allow the company to maintain its roughly $7 billion worth of equipment in Venezuela through a narrowly tailored sanctions waiver, a senior White House official told the Post. So they had until today to remove everything, $7 billion worth of equipment. And then on the day before that deadline was supposed to hit, they were told, no, you don't have to do it. First off, they weren't doing it, so they already knew. Second of all, no responsible president, and Trump is a responsible president, would allow the company to believe that it had to move everything out, $7 billion worth of equipment, and then stop it right at the end without telling them. That would be a terrible thing to do for a company with, and you can hate them all you want. You can hate the oil industry. It doesn't matter. Chevron has considerable importance and considerable power in the world. It will be renegotiated so that Chevron can remain, but no money for Maduro, which was the issue. Yes. And then we'll hear that that little piece has been chipped off of this plan too. Every one of these Trump plans against these quote unquote dictators are very aggressive, and then they're scaled back over time as people begin shifting in their views and things change. The waiver, first reported over the weekend by Bloomberg, will allow Chevron to perform essential upkeep, but not allow energy exploration, according to multiple sources. So they just can't go create new wells. And I'm going to skip down here. They're talking about Rick Grinnell. So the big move was this. I should have highlighted this one as well. Where is it? The Post on Friday revealed that special envoy to Venezuela, Rick Grinnell, pulled what insiders described as a Hail Mary move to try and save Chevron's ability to sell Venezuelan oil by negotiating the release of an American detainee to show Trump that Maduro was willing to play ball. So Maduro gave Trump a person, and that equals out right here. Oh, it's amazing they're able to get business done. And good for Rick Grinnell, by the way. This is the part that I thought was especially interesting, though. The envoy's plan, according to multiple sources, is to wait out Secretary of State Marco Rubio, a staunch critic of Maduro who advised Trump on the waiver, and push the White House to let the oil flow again once the Floridian is no longer serving in the administration. So the expectation that Rubio might leave and then a different policy will be implemented upon his exit, perhaps by Rick Grinnell. And Rick Grinnell is doing what might be considered shadow diplomacy, except for the fact that he's been named as a U.S. envoy. But it would undermine the supposed position of Marco Rubio, who the globalists still believe they have some hooks in, at least it would seem, and that he still adheres somewhat to his neocon roots. But I don't know. Doesn't seem to be the case. Whatever it is, the job's going to get done because the plan's already in place and both sides already know it. Nicolas Maduro is not being surprised about any of this stuff. A few months ago, and I don't want to spend too long on this, but Nicolas Maduro said that the DEA and the FBI under the fake and illegitimate Biden administration were responsible for bringing Tren de Aragua into the United States and protecting them. That's kind of a big deal. Maduro said he probably would have had a good relationship with Donald Trump. It's probably a big deal. It's probably telling the truth. And they probably do have a good relationship because Trump keeps good relationships with all of these other world leaders who are the heads of powerful countries. And Venezuela has the potential to be a powerful country, but it has been destroyed by the regime for decades because they didn't have the government they wanted in place. And that's all that's required to destroy a country. We've heard that Venezuelans are dirt poor and eating their dogs and eating their cats and eating the pets of the people that live there or whatever, right? And we're told that communism did that. Communism did do that, but not Venezuelan communism, global regime communism. Cut off the trade routes, cut off the resources, use the propaganda, use military if you have to, although as far as we know, it hasn't happened there, although who knows, in surrounding areas, etc. Sanctions, the rest of it, you can destroy an economy if everyone is reliant on the same economy with that top-down centralized control by the global regime. They can destroy countries through sanctions, trade routes, resources, and the rest of it. And that's what they tried to do to Russia in 2022. It did not work. Let's go to Patrick Byrne quickly. Here he is upset at Laura Loomer. I find it exceedingly odd to see Laura Loomer now carrying water for Maduro and, parentheses, Obama-linked Chevron. It is senseless to say We must coddle Venezuela so they do not become China's. They already are a proxy for China. Laura, are you being paid by Chevron or Maduro? And of course, he includes stuff about election fraud in Venezuela from Sheriff Darleaf. And there are multiple conclusions to be drawn from many things. And I think Patrick Byrne has drawn the wrong conclusions. But suggesting that Laura Loomer is getting paid off by China or by Maduro or by Chevron, I guess, is a little crazy. I don't see any reason to believe that, although maybe she is. I don't know. Okay. I think Laura Loomer is fine on some things, really bad on other things. And that's all good, man. Everybody has their opinions on everyone else. That's fine. The idea that she's paid off doesn't work for me. I'm saying those things. I've been saying them for a year and a half or longer. I'm not paid by Maduro or Chevron. If I was, I'd probably not be doing any of this stuff. Imagine they paid me enough to put out this messaging and I'm like, no, thanks. I'm good. I don't require that much money. I just want to live my life and not do this. I can't imagine being paid by the machine, by the corporations to promote their messages. If I ever found out that I was doing that unwittingly, I would immediately stop. I would probably not do this job at all anymore. Okay. Because I think it's important not to get fooled by that. And I don't like any outside influence over my thinking. I don't even really listen to anything anymore. I just read stuff and watch what the machine feeds us. That, I think, is where you can find the most information. So I don't know where Patrick Byrne is coming from on all this stuff. Maybe one day he and I will talk about it. I'd be interested in that conversation. I don't imagine that he has read the International Crisis Group's report on Venezuela from 2020, and I don't imagine that he understands who the parties are who are pushing for regime change in Venezuela. The parties pushing for regime change in Venezuela are the people who steal elections here, okay? Are the people who steal elections worldwide, are the people who serve the global regime. Could not be more clear, okay? The International Crisis Group is made up of corporations, energy companies, and banks primarily, philanthropists, people from think tanks, the military-industrial complex, and it's led, the Soroses, it's led by Mark Malloch Brown, Lord Malloch Brown, who is a Soros guy and is a Dominion guy. And they want regime change in Venezuela from Maduro. And they use all the tools at their access to remove Maduro. So the people Patrick Byrne says he hates hate Maduro, yet Patrick Byrne still hates Maduro. Makes no sense. Sorry, I would encourage him to read that. And if I was ever going to have a conversation with him about this subject, not that I think I will, the first requirement would be for him to have read that report, because otherwise the conversation would be pointless. All right, let's shift gears. Or no, not shift gears. Sorry, this is Fox Business. Just one quick clip on this here issue. You can hear the official story.
Welcome back. The Trump administration offering Chevron a limited license to continue its Biden-era drilling operations in Venezuela. Fox Business's Kelly.
By the way, Biden-era drilling operations. So they were doing the same thing as before under the fake president, and now they're going to keep doing it once Trump's back.
Bureau is in Chicago this morning with more on this ongoing story. Kelly.
Good morning, Maria. The license Chevron was working under will expire today because it was in effect since November of 2022, when the Biden administration essentially lifted sanctions placed during Trump's first term. Now, that was done in an attempt to negotiate a more democratic election system. And now President Trump has said the Venezuelan president needs to accept Venezuelans deported from the U.S. more quickly and also reform Venezuelan elections in order for Chevron to continue doing business there. Bloomberg is now reporting that there could possibly be a new agreement that would allow Chevron to keep $7 billion worth of infrastructure in this South American country, but it will limit the exploration that they can do going further. Chevron CEO Mike Wirth telling Fox Business earlier this month that if the U.S. doesn't use Venezuela's oil, China will.
China is actually the largest buyer of Venezuelan oil today. And I think the discussions that you reference, Venezuelan government officials have been in China very recently, encouraging China to buy more. And so as the largest buyer today, the policies could drive even more of that trade to China.
So we are screwed, I guess. President Trump, he did this thing. Now Venezuela is going to give all their oil to China. They're going to become a China proxy. We are absolutely screwed because Nicolas Maduro is the most evil man in the world. By the way, Patrick Byrne said that on the 22nd. So that would have been last Wednesday. I wonder if he thinks differently about all that now that Trump has done exactly what Laura Loomer was suggesting. I'm not that he took her suggestion. You know what I mean? Okay, let's keep going. This isn't a dump on Patrick Byrne thing. I like Patrick Byrne. I just think that he's really, really wrong about this. And the idea that Venezuela is responsible for stealing our election sometime and therefore Maduro is evil forever is nonsensical. This is from CNN over the weekend. This is from Saturday. Russia launches missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian capital hours after prisoner swap begins. How about that? Swapping prisoners and bombing at the same time. Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, came under a large-scale Russian drone and missile attack overnight into Saturday, just hours after Russia and Ukraine began a major prisoner exchange. At least 15 people were injured across multiple districts in the city, according to Ukraine's national police said on Telegram. Okay. The city's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, isn't he a boxer, said the attack triggered fires and left debris strewn throughout the city. Multiple residential buildings were damaged, officials said. Explosions and loud sirens could be heard blaring across the capital. In video shared by Reuters, several fires could be seen against the nighttime skyline. The nighttime attack came after Russia and Ukraine completed the first phase of what is expected to be the biggest prisoner exchange since the start of the war. Okay, and we can leave that there. So Kyiv is under the greatest barrage it's experienced this entire time. Right as Russia and Ukraine agreed to swap prisoners and are swapping prisoners, Russia also decides to blow the shit out of Ukraine in their most important city, the happiest place on earth, the place that was left untouched by this war up until now. So untouched that people in Kyiv are constantly videoing themselves at nightclubs and posting it online, and everybody sees it. Still totally under a terrible, terrible, awful barrage. Now, after this event, Trump had the opportunity to let everybody know how bad Vladimir Putin is and to create some narrative space between himself, and the Russian leader. Here he is on a tarmac on Sunday.
I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all. President, what do you want to do about that? I'm surprised. I'm very surprised. We'll see what we're going to do. What am I going to tell you? You're the fake news, aren't you? You're totally fake. All right, any other questions? I don't like what Putin is doing, not even a little bit. He's killing people. And something happened to this guy, and I don't like it.
Very, very strong and assertive right there. That was hilarious. So why would I tell you you're the fake news? Okay, well, the fake news just told you, the fake news has told everybody that Russia is bombing the shit out of Ukraine. And so Trump accepts the fake news story and tells them, oh, I don't like that at all. That Putin, I thought we were on the same page, but here he is going crazy. On one hand, he's swapping prisoners, and on the other hand, he's just trying to blow the shit out of Ukraine. How could he? People assume that Donald Trump is telling them the straightforward truth at all times. And that if Trump, in his statements, seems to accept something as true, that thing is therefore true. So if Trump responds to and says that Russia has been hitting Ukraine and killing lots of people, that means it's true that Russia has been bombing Ukraine and killing lots of people. But that's not how truth and falsity work, okay? That's just an appeal to authority. You're saying you believe Donald Trump tells the truth in every situation, no matter whether or not he contradicts himself, so long as it falls in with what the rest of mainstream media is saying, okay? So if Donald Trump assumes the narrative from the fake news, from the mainstream media, from the television, whether or not it's true, if he assumes it, it becomes true to people who don't think for themselves, okay? And Donald Trump, by the way, wants everybody to think for themselves, okay? Donald Trump, I don't think, wants a situation where all the American people take his word as gospel, whatever he says. Why do so many truthers do that? Got to ask yourself. Trump saying that Putin is hitting Ukraine hard is not proof of Putin hitting Ukraine hard. There's not going to be proof of that, okay? Because these are stories made up by intelligence apparatuses and the military-industrial complex, or whoever might be fighting that, which also has its own intelligence apparatus and military-industrial complex, okay? It's an information war. Just saying. Let's keep going. Here is Trump, also from the same appearance on the tarmac. As soon as my link will pull up, and here it is, again on X, formerly Twitter. This is RT, just another funny comment here. Quick one.
I haven't heard that, but maybe that would be a reason. I don't know, but I have not heard that.
Okay. Now, it's kind of difficult to discern just from that clip, but the question was about whether or not Putin is bombing the shit out of Ukraine in response to them attempting to assassinate him by taking down his helicopter with drones. Because we also got that story. Now, it didn't work. It turned out they were able to take out all the drones that were threatening Putin's helicopter, but that's definitely where they were going. They launched all those drones at the exact time that Putin was taking off. And so that's proof that that event happened, and that event caused Putin to retaliate. And Trump said that Putin did retaliate. Therefore, all of it's true. Of course, there's another option. That's that none of it's true. And that it's just narrative manipulation from all sides to continue to bleed out the regime in an information war, because they're getting crushed in the information war. You can believe whatever you want about the state of the world. They're getting crushed in the information war. Nobody believes the authoritative sources anymore. And as we showed earlier, nobody believes the influencers anymore. Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, James Lindsay, Charlie Kirk, all taken as very seriously. They're getting taken less seriously now. And I know people out there are like, Charlie Kirk's a good guy. How could you say that? Well, I can say that because 3 years ago when I was saying it about Ben Shapiro, people had the same reaction. And now nobody has that reaction because everybody's like, oh, yeah, well, yeah, Ben Shapiro is just obviously a neocon Zionist shill running an info op with a ton of money. What's Charlie Kirk doing? Shilling for neocons, shilling for Zionists, running an info op with a ton of money. He even debates children. They both do the same thing. It's one playbook. It's the same program for both of them. Okay? So I'm sorry if it hurts your feelings. I'm going to stick with my track record and the fact that you can see them lying and serving a cause that is not American. There's not much else you need to know. But hey, everybody's got to make their own minds up. Trail Rider in the chat just said, thumbs up, Badlanders. Well, whether you're a Badlander or not, and I hope you are, but whether you are or not, please hit the thumbs up. I suppose there's a world that could exist where that would help. Who knows? It's a good practice to get into. Generally, if you are interacting with content that you like, all social media algorithms are set to further promote that content. Okay. Engagement is the number one thing the algorithms seek out. So engaging with content you like is actually important if you want that content to be spread further. Whiskey Girl says, if you're not a Badlander, you really ought to be. And I agree with you, Whiskey Girl. I want to direct your attention just momentarily to Alex Jones, or whoever's playing Alex Jones at this point, because like that doesn't look anything like Alex Jones. He's just a different guy now. Different eyes, much skinnier, basically like the Dana White model. They just downloaded Alex Jones's consciousness into the Dana White form and whatever. He's still got the weird voice. Here's what he says. Is President Trump being kept in the dark about the Ukrainians trying to assassinate Vladimir Putin 2 days ago with kamikaze drones? Trump says Putin is acting crazy after Russia launched big air attacks on Ukrainian cities. But does he know that Zelensky has escalated drone attacks on Russian cities in the past 2 weeks? I predict that Trump is being intentionally kept in the dark about the NATO cartel's desperate attempts to sabotage the peace process. Share this report now if you want to stop the globalist plan to trigger World War III. Alex Jones at this point is just a test to see whether or not you're retarded. President Trump doesn't know about the drone attack that justifies Putin's response, the biggest attack on Kyiv ever. You don't have to say it's fake, but you really shouldn't say it's real. You know? What does it mean to just accept what news articles say at this point? I don't know. It's getting a little ridiculous. Okay. Something funny in the chat. April Ann says, that's pretty good. Talking about my Alex Jones impression. Maybe you can get some contacts and play Alex next. And I'm not sure if you mean contacts inside InfoWars or blue contacts so that my eyes are bright and steely. Oh, man. I'd have to beef up a little bit too, I think. Although not fully beefed like Alex Jones used to be, like this new, leaner, fitter, happier, more productive. If you know that reference, by all means, throw it in the chat and I will give you credit. Fitter, happier, more productive. Okay, so here's the story that we're being told is true. Doesn't appear in that many media outlets, as you might imagine, because A, we're dealing with Russian propaganda, quote unquote, as far as the regime media outlets are concerned. Ukraine would never do something like this. Ukraine tries to kill Putin by downing his chopper in massive drone blitz near war zone. Ukraine reportedly made a bold attempt to target President Vladimir Putin's helicopter with drone strikes as it flew over Russia's Kursk region last week, following reports of Putin's proximity to the war front. Major General Yuri Dashkin revealed that numerous UAV attacks coincided with Putin's unusual visit near the combat zone. It was noted that Putin had visited the Kursk region on May 20th. Dashkin reported, during the period when the president was working in the Kursk region, and the enemy launched an unprecedented attack with unmanned aerial vehicles. The air defense group in this area destroyed 46 aircraft-type Ukrainian military drones. Okay? So, is it possible that the global regime is launching attacks against Vladimir Putin. Sure, I guess it's possible. That would be an awfully bold thing to do while the regime and its European backers are attempting to negotiate with Russia for an end to the conflict. They want to get back all of the regions of Ukraine that are now Russian or independent under Russian control. They want all of that back, including Crimea, which hasn't been theirs for 10 years, that the Obama administration gave up. The regime wants all that back. That's the conditions for ending the war. They want all of Ukraine back under their control and Russia to get out. And they want to just have things like they were when they overthrew the country in 2014. That's obviously not going to happen. Is their position improved vis-a-vis Russia by trying to kill Putin? Seems kind of crazy, doesn't it? Like, as if Putin being gone would allow Alexei Navalny's wife, his widow, to become Russian president. I mean, that's the person that they're propping up as the leader of the opposition. Are they right-wing leaders? I mean, Putin's like a communist dictator, right? Oh, no, he's a right-wing autocrat dictator. Really? None of it makes sense. You don't have to call it fake, but you shouldn't call it real. I'll call it fake. And then you can say, yeah, I think he's being irresponsible this time. Totally. I get it. Starborn says, I'm going to lose my voice. It was probably from that Alex Jones impression. Shouldn't have done that. It actually made me kind of lightheaded. It was weird. So Donald Trump truthed this out on Sunday in the evening. I've always had a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin of Russia, but something has happened to him. He has gone absolutely crazy. He is needlessly killing a lot of people. And I'm not just talking about soldiers. Missiles and drones are being shot into cities in Ukraine for no reason whatsoever. I've always said that he wants all of Ukraine, not just a piece of it. And maybe that's proving to be right. But if he does, it will lead to the downfall of Russia. Likewise, President Zelensky is doing his country no favors by talking the way he does. Everything out of his mouth causes problems. I don't like it, and it better stop. This is a war that would have never started if I was president, if I were president. This is Zelensky's, Putin's, and Biden's war, not, quote unquote, Trump's. I am only helping to put out the big and ugly fires that have been started through gross incompetence and hatred. So once again, he accepts their entire story. And in accepting the entire story and reacting to the story in a way that shows he accepts it, he's then able to go after their side too and say that Volodymyr Zelensky better shut his mouth and stop what he's doing. Message delivered. Perfectly protected, narratively speaking, by the acceptance of what is almost certainly a bullshit narrative about Russia. So again, it's not an argument not to trust Trump. It's an argument that says you have to know what Trump's trying to do and not just take his words at face value every single time he gives them. Again, welcome to think I'm crazy, but we've got years of evidence to show that I'm not. So, do I anticipate World War III? Well, hey, maybe on TV. In reality, no chance. No chance. Rocks cry out in the chat, $20. Thanks, Chris, for sharing your journey with us and all you do today. We appreciate you. Well, thank you very much. That's very kind. And I appreciate you and your consistent support as well. Rocks cry out. A hello to YouTube, a hello to Substack. Let's get back into it. We are now fully on the home stretch. Let's see how quickly we can do this without sacrificing quality. Germany's MERS. Hold on, let me pull this up. I'm really screwing everything up here. Really screwing everything up here. Hold for processing. Here we are. The Associated Press. Goodness gracious. Keep slipping my screen. Germany's MERS says there are no more range restrictions on the weapons supplied to Ukraine. So over the last 3 years, 3.5 years, we've had the United States of America and countries like Germany supplying Ukraine with all their weapons, giving them all the weapons, all the money, and just none of it ever reaches. And the stuff that does reach them is all super old, and they can't use it against Russia's much more high-profile equipment. But now Ukraine has some drones, so they're back in the fight. And of course, they got those Nazis that the CIA trained, and those guys, they really know what they're doing. So the entire time, weapons haven't reached Ukraine. The weapons that have reached Ukraine have been old and decrepit and probably not sufficient to engage a military superpower state to the point where you're going to be able to degrade their capacity enough to make them relent in a war that they believe is existential. Again, the entire thing is nonsense. And I know it's hard to believe that something so big, a narrative so important that so many people are so invested in, that has taken up 3.5 years of our time, is bullshit. But when you break it down in all its characteristics, it is bullshit. So you then have to ignore the fact that all of it is bullshit separately to believe that it's all true together. And why would anyone who cares about the truth ever do that? You don't have to call it fake. Just saying you shouldn't think it's real. So MERS, this new British chancellor, this new German chancellor, he's going to do what the Ukrainians need, the Ukrainians, as Victoria Nuland calls them. Germany's new chancellor said Monday that his country and other major allies are no longer imposing any range restrictions on weapons supplied to Ukraine as it fights the Russian invasion. Friedrich Merz has plunged into diplomatic efforts to try to secure a ceasefire and keep Western support for Ukraine intact, becoming Germany's leader nearly 3 weeks since becoming Germany's leader nearly 3 weeks ago. And that reminds me, I have to pull up something that is probably worth seeing when we're talking about MERS. On Monday, he said, there are no longer any range restrictions for weapons that have been delivered to Ukraine, neither by the British, nor by the French, nor by us, and not by the Americans either. That means Ukraine can also defend itself by, for example, attacking military positions in Russia. Until a while ago, it couldn't. It can now. We call this long-range fire in jargon, also supplying Ukraine with weapons that attack military targets in the hinterland. Okay, Friedrich, sure. Who wouldn't believe that? Guy who's been here for 3 weeks? The last time we saw Friedrich Merz, by the way, he was on a train with Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, seeming to hide their cocaine gear. And that reminded me that we had an important Emmanuel Macron sighting this week. Here is Manny Mac getting abused by his former teacher, who is 24 years older than him. They met when Manny Mac was 15, and she might be a dude. This is Brigitte, I think that's her name, Macron, shoving Emmanuel Macron by his face. Oh, the horror. Oh, how could she? Oh, there it is again. It gets worse every time. And initially they said the Elysee said that it didn't happen, just like the cocaine thing. And then they said, well, they're just playful. They're playful people. That's all it is. Hold for processing for just a moment. I lost one of my key graphics here. Can't live without it. Got to bring it up for this next piece. We're going to go to a post on X, formerly Twitter, from none other than Newt Gingrich. And Newt, we will know as a sometimes Trump person who is also sometimes not Trump. And maybe he's still an establishment Republican and neocon, or maybe he's just doing what he needs to do to make the narrative move. I kind of think it's the former. He said yesterday, President Trump is right to be publicly exasperated with Putin. Putin's deliberate use of violence against civilian targets for 3 straight days requires a response. American military aid to Ukraine should be dramatically increased in quantity, quality, and freedom to use it anywhere, including in Russia. The secondary oil embargo should be imposed to break the Russian economy, and Russian financial operations outside Russia should be blocked. Putin will only stop if he has no choice. Any other strategy is wishful thinking, which will extend the war and cost more innocent lives. And on Newt's behalf, I would give to him the secondary oil embargo and breaking the Russian economy through restricting their financial operations. I would give him those are bullshit, okay? Because A, they're self-sufficient in terms of their resources. They can sell to other countries, unless he's talking about us preventing other countries from buying Russian oil, which is like crazy and totally antithetical to America first. That part doesn't make sense. The economic sanctions, they didn't work in 2022. They're just going to try harder now, and then they're going to work, even though Russia's 3.5 years further along in the BRICS currency project, the Bitcoin mining, the move away from SWIFT, rerouting their own trade partners, resources, and all that. No, that's ridiculous. So maybe Newt's just playing the game. The idea that Ukraine's going to increase their military effort, that's nuts. And American military aid increasing to Ukraine, also insane. There's no way either of those things are going to happen. So at that point, read it as you will. Is Newt a neocon, or is he pushing an impossible narrative to make that narrative look really stupid? Could be the latter. Just got to leave the possibility open. You know, I think that that might be a bit of a stretch, right? To explain Newt's position. And in that situation, if you feel like it's a bit of a stretch, then go with the surface interpretation. If that's, what you're inclined to do. I would suggest that it is always best to be as skeptical as you possibly can be. Apologies, it was taking me just a second to get to a post that I need. Sometimes the computer doesn't do exactly what I want it to do. General Michael Flynn, in response to Newt Gingrich's post, played the other side, or just as sincerely bringing forward the other side. He says, absolutely not, in response to Newt. This is not what the American people voted for. Do you know the more we push, the stronger China becomes? You read that right? Zelensky is a total crook. There is a massive whistleblower case filed in a U.S. court, and our DOJ is well aware of, for close to $50 billion of U.S. taxpayer monies that Zelensky and his cronies ripped off. Do you know there is a Chinese delegation that recently met with the Ukrainian ambassador in London with bags of cash, offering him, a former Ukrainian general, a bribe to work with them? Do you know the Russians are offering members of the Ukrainian parliament who know the global media have been lying about who's winning the war? Psst, it ain't Ukraine. Ask yourself why. Do you know that Putin just met with General Haftar from Libya? Libya has massive resources of oil and rare earth elements, to include uranium. The U.S. should be meeting with him instead. Oh, that's very interesting. General Flynn says, I am not anti-war. I am anti-stupid war. And this is as stupid a war as we can get ourselves further involved with. Obama and his cronies are the ones who created the conditions that started this war, post-Sochi Olympics, around the 28th of February in 2014. Trump kept it under control during his 45th presidency. Biden let it get completely out of control because he wasn't in control of any of his presidency. I could go on. People that sit in ivory towers talk a lot, while soldiers go off to war and die for the wrong reasons. Your reasoning is wrong. On this Memorial Day, we need to demand that common sense prevails, and real Donald Trump, who is doing all he can, needs to seriously consider who he has cutting the deals. Get the neocons out and insert smart people who can stop the killing and come to an arrangement that works for those most affected. That is the people of Ukraine. And so General Michael Flynn is making the strong anti-war case right there. He's making the same case. So what is the likelihood of this kinetic World War III that's being thrust upon us, that we are being told we must buy into this and then believe and act in whatever ways the television describes? Look at this threat we are imposing upon you. Take it as true and react accordingly by giving us all the money, all the power, all the control. Give us free reign to fix this problem. And we're not going to fix it. But what are your chances without us? This is, while we're on the subject of neocon warmongers, and hey, is Mark Levin playing a part? Mark Levin would be really, really hard to make an effort. He would be a hard character to attribute the explanation and the leeway that I just gave Newt Gingrich a few minutes ago, because Mark Levin has always been like this, and it's about Israel. I can imagine Newt not caring as much as he seems to about Russia, Ukraine. It's a lot harder to imagine that Mark Levin doesn't actually care about Israel, and he's trying to expose what the Israeli regime has become. If we find out at the end of all of this that that's what he was doing in the cleverest way imaginable, well then, okay, Mark Levin, you're a great guy. But until then, I'm going to go with this. So this is a post that Ghost of Base Patrick Henry found. A woman called Lori Love. I have no idea who this person is. She said, it's Memorial Day. People are grieving the loss of their loved ones, and you're over here salivating for more war. F you, Mark. And he wrote back, for whatever reason, you at the pool shopping, and he called her a piece of shit. Then he calls her an asshole. And she responds, Mark Levin calling me a piece of shit is a high honor, actually. And I would agree with you about that, Lori Love. There are a few better people for that than Levin. A couple quick clips from Putin here in a speech that he gave yesterday, just to see where he is coming from. And I may have to read the subtitles over it on one of them. I think one of them is translated, and I don't remember which one it is.
It wasn't us who organized the coup in Ukraine. We constantly heard that democracy and the rule of law and elections are paramount, but they staged a coup, a bloody coup at that. And they went full on, tried to conquer the Donbass and killing people with helicopters. They forced us to do what we're now doing. And they're trying to make it look as if it's our fault. And the next step, and it's no coincidence that I said that one of our greatest concerns was software and cybersecurity. And of course, we also had financial institutions working actively to address this, and we had many of our people working in foreign companies. But you managed to collect resources.
All right, we'll leave it right there. Interesting from a software perspective that he's mentioning software and cybersecurity issues as something that they need to be building up. But he put the blame squarely on the global regime for a bloody coup that was staged in 2014. One more clip from Putin. And I think this obviously would be the one then that I have to read over. Let's see if I do. Well, it's not us who organized the coup d'etat in Ukraine. I mean, all the time we've been told we need democracy, elections, a coup d'etat. That's all. As if that's the way. Sorry, I got behind on the translation here. As if that's the way it's supposed to be, a bloody one at that, and then we moved on. Move on, suppress Donbass there, and so on. People out there being wiped out from helicopters and airplanes. It's just ridiculous. Forced us to just do what we're doing now. But they're trying to make it our fault, aren't they? And the next step, you absolutely said the right thing. It's not by accident that I say that one of the main concerns we had was the software. And we can leave it there once again. So there's Putin's current state of mind, supposedly. He doesn't seem like he is going for the throat, although I think maybe there was a clip that I didn't grab where he was speaking a little bit more aggressively about going after the West. But I would distinguish between the West and the United States of America. And I would generally think that people might want to begin thinking of these things as distinct, okay? Because there's a lot more involved in the West than classical Greek and Roman history and all the great artwork and the architecture and the rest of it, okay? And you got to eventually think about what regime was responsible for funding and creating all of that, okay? And so maybe the thing was the joining of two forces, the regime's force, the money, the funding, the control over these cultures. That's part of it. And then there's something else besides that. And the something else besides that is not what they're referring to when they're referring to the West. They're referring to something that the regime has built. So I think it's important. We can just be Americans, okay? We don't have to sign up for Europe. Yeah, their architecture is better because we've been a regime-dominated nation for the last 80 years. And in that time, we've had our nation turned into like some weird communist dystopia with square buildings everywhere and giant shopping centers. And it's terrible. So we can appreciate that part of culture without suggesting that we are the same as that. Where are we? We're almost at the end here. So here we have the Daily Mail today. And we don't need to go too deep into this, but the Daily Mail's headline, Russia bends to Trump after crazy Putin comments in latest sign, peace is on the horizon. So all of the war mongering over the Memorial Day weekend, and this is what we get. A prisoner swap was revealed Tuesday by Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, who praised Trump as a man who wants results as he spoke at an event in Turkey. As Lavrov announced the prisoner swap, sources told the Kyiv Post, a propaganda outlet, that Trump was seriously considering lifting all restrictions on how Ukraine uses weapons on Russia. So Russia bends to Trump. Lavrov says nice things about Trump. They're doing a prisoner swap, but also Russia's bombing the shit out of Ukraine, and Ukraine now gets to bomb the shit out of Russia, and Trump says it's okay. That's not a real world you're describing, all right? And that contradiction has to play when you're thinking, should I believe Trump in this instance? Should I take his words at their surface interpretation and face value and say whatever he says is true and therefore all of these events are real? Or should you look at the events that would have to be real together, understand they can't possibly be real together, and then dismiss those events. I would suggest to you that the second one is the only intellectually responsible thing to do, which sucks because 95% of the country is still doing the other thing. Hopefully it's not that many. It's too many truthers. When the truthers stop doing it, maybe the rest of society will. If we are upstream in an information stream that flows gradually out to the general public, to the standard issue villagers out there, to the quote unquote normies, if the truthers are polluting that stream at the top because they're not able to think through these things, because they're such grovelers and statists that they will do whatever they're told as long as it's by their side, assuming they can understand what the sides are, and they can't. If they're not doing it, it's not going to get out into the public. Everybody should demand the truth at all times, skepticism at all times, balancing these situations at all times, and seeing whether or not the contradiction in those situations is greater than I trust whatever this person says. And yes, he's Donald Trump. I understand that. He's the greatest catalyst for truth. It doesn't mean that everything he says is true and representative of reality in Reality Prime. Here is Donald Trump today on Truth Social. What Vladimir Putin doesn't realize is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have happened to Russia. And I mean really bad. He's playing with fire. What is Trump saying there? Is he saying that Donald Trump is the one, he is the one who has held off the global regime from doing all these bad things to Russia? Bad things would have happened if it weren't for him. Is he going to start doing bad things in the future? Or is this just negotiating leverage, narrative leverage? I would suggest it's just leverage. There's not going to be a World War III between the United States and Russia and the European backers who have shown no signs of any strength whatsoever for 3.5 years, and truthfully much longer, because the entirety of their strength was the United States military. So we will leave it there. I hope you all had a happy Memorial Day weekend. I will be back on Friday. And just to let you know, next week and the week after are going to be a little touch and go for me, okay? I have some family visiting at the end of next week, and then I have to go out of town briefly at some point in the week following. So I think I'm going to have probably Monday, Wednesday next week, and Monday, Wednesday the week after that. And if I can do more, I will do more. But then we're basically at that midpoint of June, okay? And then things are going to kind of just change a little bit. I'm going to focus more on writing as I have been. People respond well to the writing, and I'm trying to write some books. So I'm going to have to take some time for that and scale back on the shows a little bit if that's what's ultimately required. If I hit a stride before then and start doing good work, I'll keep doing the shows as long as everything can still line up and function appropriately. But I will be back Friday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. Actually, hold on a second. Before I do that, I know that I missed at least one Rumble rant. Polymathanon, $5. Gotta love Chris Paul. Even if you're APL, you'll still love him. Thanks, brother. Well, hey, thanks. Also, I don't know what it's like to be APL, but I think it's probably something like this. Well played. All right. I'll be back on Friday, the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic, and Joe Biden was never.
Well,
what?
You know who I am, don't you?
Well, you ain't Fiona Apple, and if you ain't Fiona Apple, I don't give a rat's ass.
What's wrong with being an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times? What do you think, Max?
Do you want to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times?
Yeah, I think I'd like to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times.
It's not true. It's more true than I would perhaps prefer.
And I will not let you down.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
What? In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com, and for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon. Down on the range.